Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the North Sydney Local Planning Panel. The panel meets once a month to determine just a small number of development applications that can't be determined by council's planners. And today on the agenda, we have 9 items. And we have had the opportunity of reading the officers' report. They've been on the internet, and everybody else has had that opportunity as well. And the panel members have undertaken individual site inspections where necessary. So I would like to open the meeting and just introduce myself. I'm Jan Morell, and I am chair of this panel, and I have some 40 years experience as a town planner, and my last job was with the Land and Environment Court for 14 years as a commissioner, and I currently just chair or sit on independent planning panels to determine development applications, both at local government level and at the state level. I would just like to say that I have no conflict of interest with any item on the agenda, and I'll ask each of the members sitting on the panel today to introduce themselves and advise whether they have any conflicts of interest. First of all, Ian Pickles.
Yes, good afternoon. My name's Ian Pickles. I'm a town planner with over 40 years experience in both local government and private practice. Thank you.
Tony.
Hi, my name's Tony Caro. I'm a Sydney architect, urban designer, and for the last 5 years, the focus of my work has been in a design review role and sitting on panels such as this.
Thank you. And
my name is Jane Van Hagen. I'm a registered architect. I'm on a panel as a community representative. I have lived in the local area for over 30 years. And I have a conflict of interest with the first item on the agenda with Carabella Street due to knowing one of the submitters. So I'll be sitting out.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. We'll call you back for the second item. Just so that everybody is aware of the format for this afternoon, we hear from, first of all, anyone who has made a submission or objection to a development application, and then we invite the applicant and his or her representatives to respond to those issues that submitters may have and to address the panel on issues. And then there may be questions from the panel of the applicant's representatives as well, and also from time to time there will be of any community representatives. So the first item on the agenda is number 22 to 24 Carabella Street. And I will just say that the process also includes that following this public meeting today, this panel goes into a private determination session, and we determine each of the development applications, and the panel's minutes report will be on the council's website generally by the end of the week, if not Monday. So that is the process that we go through this afternoon. So 22 to 24 Carabella Street is the partial demolition of 2 interwar residential flat buildings and internal alterations and additions to the rear to include 26 apartments over 3 levels and basement parking for some 29 vehicles and associated landscaping. I have some submitters who wish to address the panel. Mary Louise Florian Kellett, are you available there? Mary Louise?
People in the meeting, but I can't see her.
I'll call you again later. Richard Buick? Okay, I'll call you again later. And I'll have Julie McKenzie.
Here.
Julie McKenzie, thank you. You can take yourself off mute and address the panel.
Can you hear me?
We can, thank you, Julie.
Oh, excellent. Yes, thank you, panel members. With respect, I think the proposed development fails key planning controls and is not in the public interest for the following reasons. This proposed development results in an increased density in the Kirribilli Heritage Conservation Area It would represent the largest increase in housing density from any development in the Kirribilli area for at least 50 years. The site currently contains 12 units. The proposal is to create 26 units. This densification is in direct breach of the North Sydney Development Plan, which expressly aims to ensure there is no significant increase in density and to discourage further intensification in the Kirribilli and other areas. Traffic and parking demand are specifically referred to in these aims. The proposal would have a significant detrimental impact on parking and traffic. The unit I own and lived in for nearly 30 years is in that block. While 29 parking spaces have been included in basement parking, the reality is there will be an unavoidable overflow of parking onto the adjacent streets. Some unit owners might own more than one car. They will have visitors, trades, gardeners, deliveries and the like. This area of Kirribilli has a severe undersupply of parking. Just in that block of Carabella Street and immediately adjacent to it, there are 34 dwellings that don't have off-street parking. Further, the area is popular with tourists and visitors to Loretto, the Royal Yacht Squadron, the Kirribilli Wharf and Cafe. And then you have the Jacaranda Festival thing. The impact on parking and traffic during the demolition and construction stage will be critical. This part of Carabella Street is one-way traffic and is the only road access to the rest of Kirribilli Point, including Admiralty House and Kirribilli House. The proposal will have highly adverse impacts on neighbours' solar access, view sharing, visual and acoustic privacy. The rooftop terraces are specifically classified as uncharacteristic development in a heritage conservation area within the Development Control Plan. The large number of wall-to-ceiling glass panels will adversely impact neighbours' visual privacy. The proposal is in breach of the Environmental Plan height limit of 12 metres. In view of the adverse impacts above, it is considered that it should not be allowed. Finally, there is the impact of the construction excavation on the surrounding properties and the dangers of severe damage to those properties. Conclusion, this proposal is in clear and significant breach of key planning controls and should not be approved. Thank you, panel members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McKenzie. We'll now move on to Stephanie Bradstock. Stephanie, thank you.
Hi, I have to thank Julie for a very coherent presentation of the issues concerned. I'm the owner of one of the heritage terraces on Peel Street, and we have, and our neighbours have submitted multiple expressions of concern. In particular, we are concerned about the potential for damage to the heritage terraces during the construction and excavation period, and it was particularly concerning to only find out on the release of Council's assessment report that there is now a third floor of below ground parking that has been applied for. This is something that was not shared with us as interested parties, and we find it completely unbelievable that that's been proposed and put forward as appropriate, given all the significant concerns about damage to local properties through the construction and excavation process. The other thing, I guess there are a couple of other things that came out with this recent assessor's report that were incredible surprises. We have very significant concerns about loss of view from our third and fourth floors, and this has not been assessed in any way, and we've not been approached despite having put in now 3 submissions and being requested to be contacted. Now, there could be the accusation of disorganisation on our part, but I'd have to say that I'm currently having treatment for cancer, and there are competing priorities at the moment. So it would have been really helpful if the assessors had have actually followed through and completed a full assessment of the potential for loss of views. Also concerned about during the construction period, there's been many of our neighbours have suggested that the right of way between the proposed development and the heritage Peel Street terraces, that right of way is not used by the trucks that are carrying, hauling the excavated materials. And whilst this seemed to have been something the assessors considered, they have decided against it based on a couple of straggly robinia trees that have been removed further up the street because they're highly unsuccessful trees for the location, and you could barely call these ones trees. So I think that is another point that needs to be considered in regards to construction. I also, my husband and I also remain very concerned about the other issues that Ms. Mackenzie mentioned, the excessive height, the excessive density. There's also the loss of communal space or inadequate communal space being planned for this development. The privacy and loss of the privacy concerns have not been addressed in any way. The notion that building 9 south-facing apartment blocks is in any way in the public interest, and the lack of, consideration of privacy concerns for all the heritage terraces is really concerning. We've also had the mention of concerns about traffic, car movements, loss of parking, those sorts of issues. So I might leave it there, but I have documented these points in our third submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradstock. Can I just ask you a question about the views from your levels 3 and 4? What rooms are they?
The 4th is a study, which is occupied 7 days a fortnight by my husband, and also on weekends because there's work doesn't just fit to the working week. The floor below that, it's I have a study nook, and there's also a balcony. And they are water views with views of Neutral Bay and you can see the sailboats. It's not just a glimpse. It's not,
Okay. And are there views from level 1 and 2 of your property?
Well, it's largely that we'd be looking directly at the new development. And I did attach photos of these, poor quality photos of these, but I think if you were to go on realestate.com for when we bought the house, I have no doubt there'd be some glorious photos of the views that were advertised during the sale of the house.
Thank you very much. And I'll now go back to Marie-Louise. Is Marie-Louise on the line, please?
No. The next one we've got is Joshua Anderson.
Right.
We don't have a Stephanie Bradstock yet.
Okay.
We don't have Penelope Hill.
Right, okay. So can I invite Joshua Anderson? And if I can just say, the panel has read the objections and the letters submitted. And if you could just try and confine your address to the panel to between 3 and 5 minutes, that would be appreciated. So is Joshua Anderson there, please?
Yes, panel, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll just work through the report that we were provided with, the report prepared by Michael Stevens. The concern that Vanessa and I have, we live in 47 Caravelle Street opposite the proposed development. In summary, the report flies in the face of the numerous submissions. We saw some of the submissions that our neighbours and other residents prepared. The report is effectively repeating the content provided by the various experts and by the developer. It doesn't actually engage with the on-the-ground views provided by residents. So first, adopting the format of the report, going to the car park.
Can I just stop you there for one moment? It would be more helpful to us if you could tell us how this development would impact on you.
Yes,
as opposed to going through the report. Thank you.
Okay, the impact on us is primarily from the car parking issue. We've seen the material in the report about the additional car parks, but that doesn't engage with what we raised in our submissions about how people who have second cars will still park them on the street to work around the existing car parking restrictions. That already happens, it will continue to happen. Visitors, again, there's large numbers of visitors to the Kirribilli area. They take up parking on weekends. So the development will mean there'll be an additional numbers of visitors who, again, will not necessarily use the visitor parks. They'll park on the street, which makes it more difficult for local residents to park. And there's already a shortfall of parking in the area. And again, if the context of the Kirribilli area is that most residents do have cars because public transport is limited. It only serves a limited number of destinations. So it is quite inaccurate for the report to say that people won't need cars or people won't be using their cars because there's public transport. The station is about a 15-minute walk up the hill. There's not many local utilities. To get to Neutral Bay, it's easier to drive. So most residents in the new building will be having a car. A lot of people will have a second car, which they'll park on the street at night outside of the restricted times, and that will make it harder for the existing residents, such as me and Vanessa, to park our car. We only have one car. Yeah, so again, looking at the report, there's a shortfall in visitor spaces, so that certainly flies in the face of the reality of life in Kirribilli, where visitors do need to park on the street and there's a shortfall. Moving to density, we were quite surprised to see that the blocks themselves were zoned as R4 high density, given that the surrounding blocks are zoned as R2 low density and R3 medium density. So an increase in density will certainly impact the neighbours, not only in terms of parking, but also in terms of number of people living in the area. In turn, that'll set a precedent for other blocks to be potentially redeveloped as high density. Moving on to the height breach, we are concerned that it's a slippery slope argument. If this height breach is allowed, then other developers will say that there's a precedent that's been set. They'll be able to exceed the height breach and potentially push the envelope even further. I've looked at the revised report, and the height breach is still a material breach. I'm not directly impacted by views because of where my apartment is located, but I have seen the impact, the schematics in the report about the impact of views on other residents, and certainly the extension for the lift, well, that impacts a significant portion of the water views for the neighbours, so we'll support Steph's arguments in that regard. The engineering part on page 22 of the report, it's quite surface level. It doesn't set out what site-specific engineering conditions were recommended by council, and does not specify the basis on which the council engineers had no objection but then still imposed conditions. That's of considerable concern for all neighbours, and even for our building we're concerned that the vibration from the construction, particularly because of the increased depth of the car park excavation, we're concerned that that may affect the integrity of our building. And in general, one thing which both Steph and Julie mentioned, the lack of engagement with local residents. Council has not complied with the community engagement protocol. We've generally found out about the application and also the changes to the application at the last minute, so to speak, with very limited time to respond. So the report is quite inaccurate when it says that the community engagement protocol was complied with. And it's unclear about which direct neighbours were individually advised about the amended plans given the proximity. We certainly weren't, and it seems that neighbours such as Steph, who just spoke, were also not notified either. I'm at my 5 minutes, so I'll leave it at that.
Right. Thank you very much. I'll just see if any of the panel members have any questions. Any questions?
Yes, I had a question about the views from your unit. Are you in unit 301? Is that correct? In number 47? Or?
No, we're not in 301. We're in a neighbouring unit. We face west, so our views are not terribly, are not impacted adversely.
Hello?
I'm looking
Hello?
at a jacaranda tree. Can you hear me?
No, it's Nadine. Can anyone hear me?
Just one moment, please. We're still dealing with a previous submitter. Yes. Yes, go on, Mr. Anderson.
Yes, my view from my apartment, I face west. I'm currently in the apartment looking at a jacaranda tree. So it doesn't affect me directly, but I am mindful of the impact on other residents, and I have looked at the report, particularly in terms of how it affects Steph's view. And I just want to place on the record that I support her concerns entirely.
Right, thank you. Now, do we have, can I inquire whether we have Marie-Louise online? Richard Yorick?
Apparently he's dialing in, but I haven't.
Okay, could you dial and see whether you could raise them? Thank you.
Maddie's getting him in now.
Yeah, well, yes, I'll
have Nadine available.
Yes, I'll talk to her, but if you can try and get the others in.
Yep.
Very well. Could I invite Nadine Wheeler to address the panel?
Hello, can you hear me?
We certainly can, yes.
Hi. I actually tabled a response to the assessor's report.
Yes.
And I do have a view, and it's substantial. And I'll just read from what I wrote, if that's okay.
Yes, of course. Mm-hmm.
I read the assessor's report, and it has made assumptions about my view based on a 2014 real estate photo that was used to market the internal features of my unit, and therefore cannot be tabled as a reliable guide when determining the impact of the subject development on view sharing amenity. When the assessor endeavoured to utilise the 4-step assessment of my view, he did not go beyond the first and concluded his assessment by stating that my view was untenable, or rather the maintenance of it was untenable. From this report, I am not clear on what is untenable about my existing view. I can confirm that the street trees, as they have grown in size, now obscure part of this view for most of the year. But as they are natural, that is, evolving in shape and size and being deciduous when the branches are bare, the full view from my 2 metres by 1.2 metre living room front window and a smaller front bedroom window can be described as follows. Number 1, in the foreground, immediately in front of my unit, I am directly in front of the proposed development site, are the interwar buildings at 22 and 24 Carabella Street, which includes all of the building's vintage features, front entrance, windows, roof, chimneys, and the detail/materials that make up its very original vintage patina. And I'm very fond of it. I look at it every day. Number 2.
Can I just stop you there for one moment? And where is your property, Ms. Wheeler?
I'm in number 47, directly opposite.
Yes.
The 2 buildings that are earmarked for demolition.
Thank you.
Between these buildings, I can see the multicoloured ceramic chimney pots of the historic Peel Street houses. And number 3, above these buildings, the top of the Sydney Harbour Bridge with its 2 flags flying in the wind, and at night, the red flashing beacon. In effect, I am already view sharing because of North Sydney Council's intention to establish a Jacaranda Boulevard in Carabella Street for the visitors they like to attract to our municipality. If this is what the assessor regards as untenable about my view, then why would I be comfortable with a development that proposes to erect fixed structures beyond the height restrictions of the planning and zoning guidelines that quite possibly, potentially and permanently obscure what I value about my home? My home exists in a conservation zone, and my view is highly significant because it displays elements that are indicative of this zone. The proposed development seeks to also exist within this zone, but to do so, it seeks to obtain concessions which will act as precedents for future concessions for forthcoming planning applications, and that is actually what is untenable to me. I would welcome a more rigorous and fairer approach to the assessment of my view, particularly in regards to the reasonability of the potential impacts utilising the 4-step assessment process as established in Tenacity Consulting and Warringah Council. I believe that all 4 steps would reveal a different assessment of the outcome to the one that has currently been tabled. And that's pretty much what I have to say today. I also really value the chimneys, and I note that the demolition, I thank the developers for maintaining the facades, and I also thank you for the changes in regards to what we're going to be open balconies, which are now, I think, what are they called? Winter gardens?
Yes.
Have they got, and I do have a question, do they have glazing? The winter gardens?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. So the noise will not filter onto the street.
Yes.
Thank you for that. I have noted that there have been changes, and that's all great. They're heading in the right direction, but not quite there for me yet, because this is right out the front. I live in front of this site, directly in front. I engage with it daily and at night. I live in front of it. I have owned my unit since 2014. That real estate photo that you see, I actually was looking at a lower level unit, and this one was available at the time, and I bought this one because of that view. And I'll damn well want to hold on to it. So welcome any further questions, any site visits, whatever, but I want to be certain that I'm not looking at lift over, blocks of lifts in front of what was a really beautiful view. It's behind the trees at the moment, but hey, I'm view sharing, I'm doing my bit. But when they drop their leaves, and you can see they're jacarandas, you can see in the photo, they drop their leaves and I've got bare branches, and it's gorgeous. So,
thank you very much, Ms. Wheeler. Thank you for your assistance.
Thank you for your help today.
Thanks. Do we have any of the other submitters online?
We now have Richard. He's called in.
Right. Richard Burek, are you there on the line? Richard Burek?
Sorry? The last speaker, 47 Carabella.
Richard, you there, please? No?
It is here.
You'll have to bear with us, everybody. We do apologise for having to do all of this online. Pre-COVID, we used to sit in a room and see each other face to face. So Richard is there, I believe, but we can't bring him on screen at the moment or on the phone. So we'll go to Julie McKenzie.
Yes, hello.
Oh, yes, Richard. Thank you, Richard.
Yes.
Would you like to address the panel? Thank you. You have 3 to 5
Yes, I would.
minutes.
Thank you.
Yep. And
Okay, thanks very much.
You've been listening in so that we don't hear you. You don't have to repeat what's already been said. You may just concur. Yes, thank you, Richard.
Okay, I'd like to say the size of excavation, that on page 149, Mr. Stevens showed elevation drawings. He had stated to me the excavation was 39 metres in the long axis, 16 metres wide and 8 deep. In this last submission, a third basin has been added under 24 Carabella Street, and this deep section confronts the habitable parts of 25 Peel, which is where I live. I've gone through the drawing.
Sorry, Richard. I just need to ask you, we are getting some feedback, and it seems to be from your end because we haven't had it before in the meeting. So is there anything else that's turned on or should be turned off? Or?
Sorry, do you want me to talk about other topics?
No. We can't. We're having trouble with the sound, and there is feedback on your line.
Richard, can you please turn your computer speakers down?
I'm sorry, I'm on a telephone only.
Oh, can you turn your speakers down, please?
Sorry?
Can you please turn your speakers down?
Oh, okay.
Each time you
better.
speak, it's feeding through.
Thank you. Right, continue.
Is that any better?
That's much better.
Much better.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. It's the techie stuff. So what
Is everybody else on mute?
Yep.
I think we are, yes. Keep going, please, Richard.
Okay. The new excavation level is 12 metres deep in the three basement section, and it's about 8 metres deep in the two basement section. It's an irregular oval shape. I estimate that there's about 6,500 or 6,200 cubic metres in there. Mr. Stevens stated to me that he said that the excavation will be a minimum of 3 metres from site boundary. The right of carriageway is 3.05 metres. That means the deepest excavation will be 6 metres from the high wall of 25 field. The right of carriageway, the Macadam Road, was surfaced by local residents 23 years ago and is showing signs of wear. Mr. Stevens stated the developer has to repair the road after completion of building. Frequent vehicle traffic, 40 truck movements daily, with trucks up to 20 tonnes loaded. I couldn't get the size of these trucks from Mr. Stevens. He'll be coming, and the pit's 3 metres from the boundary. The possibility is the road could collapse into the pit unless the new concrete roadway with steel reinforcing is installed before any commencement. Of course, a heavily laden vehicle, after negotiating a 90-degree turn, after rising from the 12-metre pit, could easily ram any of the bedrooms or bathrooms of 25 Peel Street. The developer commissioned a geotechnical report which talked of many dangers. It was mentioned that permission might be asked to brace the wall of this pit by putting cables under surrounding properties and then forcing in pressurised concrete. Presumably, permission would be asked, but it's quite possible that with a private enclosed site and unaware owners, such cables could be inserted without permission. After the cables were taken out, there'd be no evidence that a crime had happened. When subsidence occurred with destabilised foundations, cracking of buildings, particularly if it happened some months or years later, the owner would be left with a severely injured house with no chance of redress. Now, North Sydney Council know, as well as City Water, that Sydney has major problems with subterranean. The Curability's got major problems. The Heritage Row stand on sandstone blocks. They're 123 years old, and the soil underneath is damp from water movements. There's no cement or steel reinforcement. I calculated truck movements would be 1,800 over the whole period. Mr. Stevens didn't challenge this calculation. We now have an extra 1,120 cubic metres of excavation. Truck movements would be in excess of 2,400. Mr. Stevens wouldn't disclose to me the dimensions of trucks or their loaded unloaded tonnage or the site or operation of a crane. He said to me that these crucial facts would be made public, quote, at the next phase, end quote. I understand that these facts are too alarming for residents who are going to be endangered. Privacy, I never asked that the upper deck at the back of my house should be private. What I'm saying is that 7 balconies from 24 Carabella at 7.5 metres face directly into all habitable rooms of 25 field.
And your dwelling, Mr. Buick?
Sorry?
Your dwelling is number what, Carabella Street?
No, I'm in 25 Peel, which is right on the carriageway.
Yes, I
That's why I
know.
keep talking about the close proximity of the pit.
Yep, I understand that. We are still having some problems with your sound, but I just also wanted to highlight to you that there are special conditions for dilapidation reports and damage in C3, C4 and C5 and C6. So there
That
are
may be fine. That may be fine, but I understand that the developer is self-regulating, that there are no building inspectors. The council rangers aren't credentialed to inspect building sites. They're not geotech or engineering trained. The developer will do as he likes, and we depend on his goodwill. Is that true?
Well, they're required to have engineers certified plans, so they just don't go in there and start excavating.
But no one will be policing it. There will be no one policing what the developer does.
Yes, sorry, there is what we call the private certifier, and their number has to be on the front of any property, so that if people have, or residents, neighbours have any concerns, they ring that number.
Well, I thought the certifier of this development would be council, or would be the panel.
No. The private certifier, there's a system of what we call PCAs, private certifying authorities.
You mean to say if I see a crack developing in my building, I talk to a certifier?
Well, the thing is, there would be documentation prior to any works being carried out on the subject site to assess whether there's been any damage. So you will have a dilapidation report prepared.
Well, who does the dilapidation report?
Well, a qualified engineer does the dilapidation report.
So they come to your house and they look at your building?
Yes, that's right. Yes. Yeah.
And is that paid for by the developer or by the resident?
No, it's paid for by the developer. It's part of the development consent. They can't carry out any works until they've done a dilapidation report.
And that's paid for by the developer?
That's definitely paid for by the developer, yes.
But whoever pays the piper calls the tune?
No, excuse me. These are professional people, and they would be liable to have their licences revoked, so that could no longer operate as engineers, structural engineers or otherwise. So that's the system that we have in New South Wales, and that is.
We've seen destruction in Kalua Street, Bondi.
Can I just say, Mr. Yeah, can I just say we would like to hear what your concerns are of this particular development on you.
I think it's dangerous. I believe it's going to crack my building.
Right. As I said,
and
there will be a dilapidation report done.
Within that zone of influence, it could crack the other 3 buildings beside me. That's why I sent the photograph. In one of the photographs of the chimneys that are on, the next group.
Yes, I have got your photographs, and I have been looking at them as whilst you speak. There is a structural adequacy of adjoining properties for any excavation works, and that's required by condition C6 and C7 and GHG C8.
But what I'm saying is that once the construction gets underway, the developer calls the tune.
No, can I just say that this is not a forum, Mr. Burek, this is not a forum for addressing the whole of the development industry system in New South Wales. This is to hear what people's concerns are about individual development applications, and that's why I would urge you to focus on what your concerns are.
I'll focus on it. I'm saying that this development proposal is dangerous. There will be damage to surrounding buildings, and not just mine, but maybe 47 and 49 Carabella and 20 Carabella. 20 Carabella, half of its pylons are within 25 metres of the epicentre.
Thank you.
So it's not just me that I'm talking about. I'm talking about that tall building, 20 Carabella, which has got 49 apartments,
Yep.
as well as the emergency bracing that's in 49. I presume that members of your panel have visited or had a look at the emergency bracing inside 49 Carabella.
The panel have inspected the site individually, as I stated earlier, yes?
Okay.
Very well. Is there any other points that you wish to raise?
No, not really. I've taken precautions myself in that I've repaired the chimney up the top, and I'll be cementing the insides of my cellar so that when cracks start appearing, there's going to be a halt to building.
Right.
Now, and if there's cracks in my building, then it's going to need bracing, emergency bracing, as we've seen in 2021 Curlua Street, where the side of the house fell off. The only problem here is we've got a very high building, and if it comes down, well, there's 3 humans living in there.
Thank you very much. Yes, I hear what you have to say, and once again, I would refer you to those specific conditions.
What I'm saying is that once the building gets started, it's self-regulating.
No, I've heard your submission. It's not
Okay, then thanks very
self-regulating.
much.
We have professional engineers that require their licences to be retained for their work. So we understand what you've said, though.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burek. And can we move now to Julie McKenzie? Are you there online?
Done her.
We've done her.
Yes, I've already spoken.
Yes, I have. Yes, I do. Sorry. And Penelope Hill. Could someone please turn off
It was Richard.
It's gone. Okay. All right then. Penelope Hill. We can all see that these are not the most perfect situations to have public meetings, but nonetheless, we will persevere. Yes?
I've called Penelope. She isn't able to speak today, but she's put in her submission.
Yeah. Okay, we have a written submission from Penelope Hill. She's unable to join us. And we had a message that Tanya Tegon may not...
I've got her on the...
You've got her online? Thank you. Yes. Thank you. We will hear from Tanya now.
Just got to call her.
Hello.
Hi, Tanya.
Okay, Tanya, you online?
Hello, are you there?
Yes, we are. Can you hear us?
Okay, can you just hold one moment? It's very kind of you to allow me to...
Is that on speaker?
Just apologies, just a moment.
Have we got the applicant and the planner online? I saw them.
2 seconds, let me confirm.
That's Sam, I think.
Hello. Yes. Chair, are you there? I apologise.
Yes, no, the panel is here. If we could hear from you now, please. Tanya?
Okay, all right. I've got a really bad crackle, so I'll just try and be really brief.
Yes.
We had a very long session. And just interrupt me if any of the matters have been covered. I apologise in advance. So my name is Tanya Tegan. I'm at the property at 20 Carabella Street, and I just wish to object to the continued issues in regard to the height, bulk and scale of this proposed development, which seems to be the cause of all the issues that have been raised in the submissions. In my view, there's been no evidence in the proposal that there's any intention to reduce 26 units to a number that's more appropriate to the scale of this site. With regard to the additional basement, there was no notification. I appreciate the report suggests that some direct neighbours were individually notified, but at number 20, we did not receive any notification in this regard. That you need to excavate a third basement level to accommodate 29 cars for this proposal is to apply a band-aid solution to the parking and to direct potential issues elsewhere. With regard to the geotechnical report submitted by the proposal, this is very light on its commentary in relation to actual facts of the land. That report reads in ways that create many expectations of what is expected that they will hope in that land, gives reassurance of not disturbing the integrity of surrounding property. The application report needs to be completed for all surrounding properties in the zone is concerning. that it is acceptable to build something at the potential risk of damaging everything else around it. The report refers to proposed development complying with site coverage and density. Just because it meets the requirement falling within R4 doesn't mean that it is appropriate in all elements when most of the issues only somewhat meet criteria. The only way to deal with height, bulk and scale of this project is actually to reduce the height, reduce the bulk and reduce the scale. The language of the report disregards community concerns by saying that there would be acceptable impacts on amenity and surrounding property. There is nothing acceptable about any amount of overshadowing that is impacts on solar property. With regard to the property at 20 Carabella, several of those lower units would be forever impacted. There'd be no means of regaining that light, and the diagrams cannot in any way feasibly place the value of that deprivation. The report comments about the Viagra being slightly underestimating the net generation of traffic, and that the expected increase would have negligible impacts on the surrounding roadworks. The fact is we already cannot find a path in this street or the two neighbouring streets. So are you basically saying that creating a worse scenario is negligible because it's already bad? You can apply whatever mathematical formula you think is relevant, but the reality is that this area is at maximum density, and it's fanciful to suggest that residents will use available transport as the parking and traffic situation currently suggests that that is not the situation. People are not availing of that public transport. The 3 levels of basement parking is a drastic means of addressing this issue, and it has unknown quantities for up and surrounding properties. To suggest the impacts are negligible, and there's a language from the report, is not on a reasonable impact, minor, immaterial or generally compatible, is not, in my view, in the public interest. The report considers sufficient environmental planning grounds have been put forward to justify contravening the development standards. But if council continue to consent to these contraventions, then it risks destroying the standards which exist to protect public interest.
Thank you very much. Is that your submission to the panel? Thank you, Tanya.
Yes, Mrs. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much for your assistance, and we will now...
For you to making an exception.
No, not at all. We have heard from everybody. We have been on this item for quite a long time, but that's fine. We want everyone to feel like they've been heard. I will now... There's nobody else out there in terms of the community who wish to address the panel. Not online that we have here. So I will now turn to Tina Christie, the town planner, and Felicia Huang, the applicant. If you would like to address the panel, and in addressing the panel, if you could comment on what you've heard from the community as well.
Thank you, Chair and panel members, for the ability to discuss this item with you today. I just wanted to say quickly that throughout the process of this application, we've worked closely with council, and we've actually made quite a number of amendments, which is now before the panel. We have reduced, I will get on to the submissions in 1 minute. We have reduced the bulk and height. We have improved materials and colours to provide a scheme that we believe integrates with the heritage nature of the area. We've increased parking, we've improved landscaping, improve the amenity of the proposed units themselves. We have reduced the impacts to neighbours by reducing the bulk and height, and we now comply with council's requirements for site coverage, unbuilt upon and landscaping areas. With regards to the submissions, I'll deal with most of them, and then Felicia, our architect, will deal with some of the specific design related ones. First of all, I'll just go through them in order of how we wrote them down from when people spoke. With regards to increased density, as I said, we comply with the council zoning and with the landscaping, unbuilt upon and site coverage. With regards to traffic and parking, we now have 29 parking spaces, and which includes 26 residential and 3 visitor. That complies with council's controls with regards to the residential parking, and the traffic report that was submitted states that we are very close to public transport, a number of means of public transport, and we believe that the proposal in the amended version that you have now satisfies the traffic and parking in the area. With regards to the concerns raised from construction, as you, Madam Chair, have said, there's a number of conditions that relate to the construction, excavation, geotech. We're happy with those conditions and we believe that they cover all the issues concerned. With regards to height, a very detailed height analysis was done under the clause 4.6 that also included a very detailed analysis of the view impacts caused from the development as a whole, but also just the portions of building that vary the height. Remember, the overall height of the buildings is no greater than what the current building is for number 24. It's just that we have got other portions of the roof that protrude beyond the height, but we haven't gone above what the existing height is for those buildings. So we believe that the clause 4.6 and the view analysis that is discussed in that in detail does address the views and concerns that the neighbours have with regards to view loss. Generally speaking, most of the views that are affected are city buildings or skyline, and they're the views that are affected by the breach in height. Any other view losses that might be impacted are basically from a compliant building. The breach in height only relates to skyline, sky, and some city buildings. With regards to, I think that's it actually, and I'll just pass you over to Felicia, who will discuss the design itself.
Thank you, panel. I'd just like to address the materiality used in the amended plan scheme. We've updated the rear addition to utilise the majority of the building facade with the same brick selection to the respective existing building, being blonde brick, to number 22 Carabella Street, and the red brown brick for number 24 Carabella Street. The top floor cladding has been requested by council to change to metal shingle cladding to symbolise more modularised cladding in lieu of the standing seams. Keeping in the same tone with the existing buildings at the front. Other than that, the front winter gardens have been retained with the same configurations of timber frame windows, so we've addressed all that with the amended plan. And also the perimeter, we sort of retained the perimeter, majority of the perimeter boundary sandstone walls as well as part of the heritage conservation intent. And we're happy with the heritage condition items C1 as well, to be part of the consent.
So if there's any questions that the panel might have, obviously we're happy with the report and we believe that the amended proposal before the panel is worthy of approval.
Just one moment, I'll just see whether the panel members have any questions. Ian?
My question is, you've probably given me the answer already, but if you could just confirm that you've looked at the, obviously you've looked at the proposed, the recommended conditions of the consent. Are you happy with those, or do you see any that you're not happy with?
We have, in regards to the materialities C1I, the vertical aluminium fencing has timber appearance to be replaced with timber fencing. With the maintenance, ongoing maintenance with timber, and then being proposed at the rear addition of the proposed development, we would like to see if it's possible to retain them as aluminium fencing with timber appearance.
I might just add to that, sorry, I might just add that where that is located at the back, it doesn't have any real heritage significance there, that fence, and it's around where the car lift is. So it would actually be better if it was made of metal, but a timber look. By all means, a timber look, we understand that.
Condition C1, was it?
C1.
Yeah.
Okay.
The fencing.
C1I.
Right. C1.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions, Tony?
Hi, I have one question. It's Tony Caro speaking. Can you just clarify what's caused the need for the third basement? Just so I'm very clear on it. Is it to increase parking? What's the reason? And when did it happen?
When did we lodge the amended plans for increased parking?
Around Easter, after Easter time.
It was after the last notification period, and because of the concerns raised by the residents, we wanted to work closely with council and make sure that we address those concerns. So
I'm just interested because you kind of talked about, I guess, reducing density or complying with density and height. But I know there were concerns about parking. And
well, that's exactly why.
Reducing the bulk and I guess the yield and increasing the parking, is that related to responding to issues of street parking? What is it?
It's in relation to issues raised by neighbours' concerns after the first neighbour notification. So we had another look at the application and realised that we could provide additional parking and also reduce the bulk and the scale of the building, which would then reduce the height and increase views. So we saw that as a win-win for the neighbours and to bring it more in line contextually with the heritage nature of the existing buildings and the surrounding context.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very well. And as I understand it, just for the record, where it's considered that amendments to plans will not have a greater impact than they're under council's development control plan, they're not re-exhibited as such or re-notified. I noticed in this instance there was some neighbour notification which went beyond what is required under council's DCP. So I just wanted to make that comment. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you all for your assistance. That is objectors and submitters. And thank you to the applicants team as well. The panel will give this due consideration and our decision will be on the website generally within a couple of days, if not the latest by Monday. So thank you all very much for your assistance. Thank you. Now I'd like to move to item number 2 now. So if we can have Jane back. Thank you, Jane. The next item on the agenda is 6 John Street, McMahon's Point. And I would invite Douglas Nicol. Are you on the line there? Douglas Nicol.
I am, thank you.
Thank you. Please address the panel.
And you can hear me okay, yes?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank the panel for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Douglas Nicol. I'm the owner of 518 Munro Street, McMahon's Point. You will have seen in the photograph I supplied an example of where our apartment is located, but I'm also representing SP 63636, which is the block of 15 apartments with about 30 residents located nearest to the relocatable shed. Probably my apartment is the closest to the shed, as you can see from the photo. Did you get the photo and video that I sent?
Yes. Yes, thank you. Yes.
Okay. We, as a group, support the recommendation of the independent planner that this application should be refused, and we hope this unlawful structure can be removed as soon as possible. It was put in without any approval, and in our view, it's not fit for purpose. If you think about the operation of a boatyard, naturally a boatyard is going to produce air pollution, noise pollution, and water pollution. And the thing is that it needs to be managed in a best practice manner. And our concern is that the relocatable shed isn't fit for purpose and doesn't represent best practice. And that's probably for a couple of reasons. First of all, the current position of the relocatable shed is in the wash bay. And as probably you know, a wash bay is used for the pressure blasting of boats. So this is quite a noisy and air polluting sort of process. So what you want is that pressure blasting should happen in the designated wash bay in order to minimize impacts from pollution. And unfortunately, at the moment, the structure is placed in the wash bay. So it means that the pressure blasting of boats is happening in the open air, and in particular very close to my apartment and very close to Munro Street. And this, as you will see from the video that I've submitted, means that it's not only noisy, but also we're getting a lot of air pollution, particulate matter, possibly toxic antifoul dispersed into the air near our apartment. And of course, it's not just our apartment. As you can see from the other photograph I've submitted, a lot of people, possibly hundreds of people, use this as a leisure walking area every single day. It's a very beautiful place to walk. The second aspect of the relocatable shed not being fit for purpose is around noise mitigation. It would be far better if the wash bay is used for the pressure blasting, because it is a very noisy process. And that shed is called a relocatable shed, but for the last few years, it hasn't actually moved from its location in the wash bay. So the beauty of it being removed from the wash bay is the wash bay can be used in order to help take some small step towards best practice mitigation around both the noise and the air pollution that comes from pressure blasting. Interestingly, we note that the independent planner's report said that the applicant did not provide an acoustic report. And we would suggest that in addition to this, an air quality report should have been provided, and possibly some collaboration with the Environmental Protection Agency for some degree of concurrence. So we are very welcoming of best practice, but we see this relocatable shed as not an example of best practice for air pollution, noise pollution, and water pollution management. There is, interestingly, a long-standing, outstanding DA, I think it's 1164/90, which has been around for many years, which was a plan to build 9 sheds on this location. And that represents maybe a better solution to actually getting to best practice management. Above all, I think I want to make the point to you that if this unlawful structure would be somehow retrospectively approved, it would send all the wrong messages to developers and builders, because it would say that you can really do what you want and you can fix it up later. So we think it would be the wrong message. Thank you for listening, and hopefully what I've said is meaningful.
Very much, Mr. Nicol. Next person I have is Karen Foster. I can see you on the line there, so if you'd like to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuting now.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, what I wanted to say to you this afternoon is, first off, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm the owner and resident of number 3 Commodore Crescent McMahon's Point. And my home sits just north of the boatyard on an upper level overlooking Berries Bay. I've lived here for almost 30 years. And I want to offer my full support of the findings of the Council's independent planner. The DA documents, I believe, confirm the applicant's disregard for appropriate planning requirements or compliance, and that's fully demonstrated by their illegal inclusion of the shed onto the site in the first place. The extensive list of missing or inadequate information provided, in my opinion, shows a complete failure to exhibit any meaningful consideration for the environment or the community of the Bay. And I'm also very deeply concerned that a group of people supposedly in tune with the vagaries of the wind have neglected to even consider the safety issues associated with a structure like this. Being employed in any kind of mobile or unrestricted fashion. The use of the shed as described in the DA would put the boatyard staff and anyone else in the bay in extreme danger. It's quite windy here on and off at Berries Bay, and I have absolute belief that that thing would become airborne at some point and either end up in my front yard or worse still in the Oval. So I urge the panel to support the findings and refuse the DA, but I would also ask the panel to take into consideration that the boatyard currently continues to function on what is an incomplete DA issued back in the early 1990s. So for this reason, I would ask that the panel in refusing this DA to include, and this is if possible, a date and time by which the shed must be removed from the site and the designated wash bay reinstated. And I don't need to go into why the wash bay is a concern, because Douglas has just covered that off beautifully. So thank you for your time. That's what I wanted to talk to you about today.
Thank you very much, Ms Foster. The next person we have is Michael Stevens. Are you on the line? Thank you, Michael.
Yes, I'm on the line.
Great.
Good afternoon, panel. My name is Michael Stevens, and I have lived in Walcott Street, Waverton, for 18 years. I object to the application. I have been active in protecting Berries Bay from overdevelopment since 2010. In 2011, I founded Harbour Care with the support of North Sydney Council. Harbour Care volunteers keep the North Sydney harbour beaches clear of litter. I check on the Berries Bay beach several times a week, and at the same time I can observe and hear activity in the Noakes boatyard opposite. And here's a quick look at the beautiful Berries Bay beach that I keep clean. I endorse the previous speaker's statements.
Can I say that the water is very still behind you?
It's lovely water, but it's a photo. I'm not.
I know, sorry.
This application appears to be a spurious attempt to legalise a structure erected without approval. It has been erected in the area designated as a wash bay. The application stated that the structure is relocated around the site on an as-needs basis, but there appears to be no need, as it has not moved since May last year. The application stated that the structure was to assist in the undertaking of repair and maintenance activities to vessels. Work has occurred only once in July last year in a structure that was not designed to contain polluting activities or noise, and I believe that such work ceased after intervention by the EPA. Since then, the structure has only been used to store wooden boats and to provide shade and some protection from rain, except that in the last few days, 2 boats have been removed and work may be happening on the remaining one after that 9-month storage in the wash bay. All the time since the structure was erected, any water blasting and acid washing of boats has occurred anywhere on the hard stand area. This often results in the toxic residue pooling on the hard stand due to blocked drains, and spray is often observed being blown over the boundaries of the yard and including over the water. The most irrefutable reason to refuse the application is so that the wash bay can revert to its intended use to reduce the risk of toxic air pollution and to contain the toxic residue to prevent any leakage into the harbour. If the applicant wishes to continue to use the structure for shelter, application should be made to locate it on the northern side of the workshed. I ask that the panel refuse this application, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter.
Thank you very much. Can I now move to Leon Reardon? Are you on the line there? Yes, I can see you. Please unmute. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, and members of the panel. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. My name is Leon Reardon. I'm speaking to you on behalf of Friends of Berries Bay Incorporated, which is a community association with over 100 members dedicated to the protection of the beauty and amenity of Berries Bay. We oppose the application for the relocatable shed for a number of reasons. Firstly, The operations on 6 John Street are subject to multiple consents. One of those is a licence granted by the EPA that operates across the whole site, including any area where the relocatable shed is proposed to be placed. Accordingly, this is an integrated development and under the EPA Act therefore requires concurrence and proposed conditions of consent from the EPA. There appears to be no such concurrence sought and consequently no proposed conditions of consent provided by the EPA. Accordingly, the application must be refused. Secondly, the operations on the site are governed by DA 116490 as mentioned by previous speakers. This was a highly contested DA that was ultimately approved because it imposed restrictions on the operations outside the proposed built sheds at the base of the cliff face. These sheds allow for proper encapsulation of the works and appropriate capture of pollutants and noise suppression, thereby leaving the waterfront largely free from these hazardous activities and reducing the impact on residents and visitors of our beautiful Berries Bay foreshore. The DA provides very limited exceptions for the use of the northern slipway for craft that do not fit in the sheds. It is clear from the applicant's EIS that they intend to use the shed across a range of unspecified locations around the site. This would allow for the use of the shed for hazardous polluting activities across the site, including on the foreshore. This approach is totally inconsistent with the current DA, yet the applicant has made no attempt to demonstrate how the operations could be conducted in a manner consistent with the current consent, notwithstanding the requests by council to provide that information to make the case. There is therefore no basis for the proposal to be adequately assessed and therefore must be rejected. Thirdly, the applicant intends to use the shed in an unsafe manner, ignoring design requirements in respect to safety. The applicant's response to the council's request for information dated 10 March refers to the method of moving the shed around the site. It refers to the shed being, and I quote, pushed around the site by hand. This implies the shed is mobile, like it's on wheels, and could be placed almost anywhere on the site. It also refers to the shed being at its, and I quote, resting place when not in use, unquote. But when you look at the design drawings for the shed, you can see that it is built like a conventional shed, bolted to concrete footings. By being bolted to the footings, the designer has been able to state that the design complies with AS 4055 in respect to wind loadings. That would mean that each location the shed would require bolts into the concrete or concrete footings, whether in operation or just resting, in order for the building to comply with wind load standards. Without the shed being bolted to the ground in accordance with the design, it will not comply with wind load standards, and as a consequence, in windy conditions, it would be a hazard to people and property on the next site, on the foreshore, on the adjoining public roads, and private dwellings. Council cannot approve an application where it is clearly stated by the applicant that it does not intend to use the building in accordance with its design in respect of an important matter like wind loading. The application must be refused. As the panel is aware, the applicant has been using this shed without consent for many years. It would appear from the EIS and subsequent statements like this, that this use has been without regard to the impact on the environment or public safety. This application seeks to make council complicit in this abuse. This proposal is against the public interest and must be refused.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reardon. Can I now invite the applicant's planner, Christy Hodgkinson, to address the panel, and in doing so, could you respond to the concerns that have also been raised? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and panel, for the opportunity to address you. My name is Christy Hodgkinson, and I am the applicant's town planner in the matter. With no disrespect to council, we believe that the assessment report does not assess what this application is actually for. The application is for use of a relocatable structure that surrounds vessels on the site in respect of which work is being or is to be carried out, consistent with the approved use of the site, which extends to both development consent conditions and further regulatory control that is exercised through the Environmental Protection Licence. To take you to the assessment report, the request for additional information that council states was not provided The applicant was asked to provide an acoustic report demonstrating the likely impact of the proposal in terms of noise nuisance and likely strategies to be adopted to maintain residential amenity. Our response to this was that the relocatable shed, which is the subject of the application, is manoeuvred around the subject site on an as-needs basis. This occurs by the shed being pushed by hand. There is no motorised equipment attached to the shed that results in any form of noise generation. There is no noise impact from the use of the relocatable shed that would result in the need for strategies to be adopted to maintain residential amenity. Therefore, an acoustic report is not required. The response is limited to that for which development consent is sought. That is, to use a relocatable structure, of which in itself does not generate noise. With regard to the concerns raised about the position of the relocatable structure being positioned on the site, again, the application is very clear on this point, stating that the structure is relocated around the site on an as-needs basis and therefore does not generally occupy a fixed position. It is, however, generally stored along the eastern side of the site between the existing sheds. Again, by nature of the proposed use and the natural term used to describe it, it is relocatable, the direct purpose of which is to be able to move this around to assist in the repair and maintenance of vessels. Any works that are physically undertaken on a vessel that is contained within the relocatable structure may only occur in accordance with the relevant development consent or the EPA licence conditions. This in itself means that such works can only be undertaken when contained within the structure in a position that is permitted by those consents and requirements. In terms of considerations pertaining to section 4.15 of the EP&A Act, the assessment indicates that it is against the threat for Sydney Harbour and has not, I quote, demonstrated how pollutions from the proposed works will be prevented from entering the environment. There are no works proposed in association with this application. This application is for the use of a movable structure only around the site to facilitate repair and maintenance of vessels. Any works that are undertaken to a vessel while they are located within the relocatable structure, again, must be in accordance with any consent and EPA requirement. In terms of visual impact, this is a structure that can be relocated around the site to assist with the movement of vessels that enables them to be repaired and maintained. The structure is mobile and therefore not intended to be in the same place all the time. Further, the most permanent position is on the eastern side of the site, adjacent to the rock face and between two sheds where there is no visual impact because of the screening that exists around this position. It is also a structure that is open on all four sides, such there is no long-term visual impediment when viewed from surrounding locations. In relation to the draft set for the environment, the assessment report suggests that the proposal would offend the relevant provisions of the draft set due to potential environmental impacts noted above. It is assumed that this is on the basis of how pollutants from the proposed works will be prevented from entering the waterway. The application does not seek consent for any works to vessels nor processes attached to this. It is an application for use of a structure associated with repair and maintenance. In terms of the LEP, the assessment report states that the proposal is not consistent with the objectives of the zone, which are to retain and encourage waterfront industrial and maritime activity, to identify sites for maritime purposes and activities that require direct waterfront access, to ensure that development does not have any adverse environmental or visual impacts, to encourage employment and to minimise the impacts of development on other land use zones. The use of the relocatable structure is entirely consistent with these objectives. Put simply, it enables and assists waterfront industrial and maritime activity that require direct waterfront access, maintains employment generating activity at the site, and minimises impacts of development on other land uses by being able to locate a vessel to a position where it does not impact other land use zones. In terms of environmental impact, there is no impact from the use of this structure, which is designed to be moved around the site. Any activities which take place while a vessel is contained within the structure are not the subject of this application. Such activities are governed by the consent and the environmental protection licence. Concerns that are expressed in terms of the height of the structure are superfluous. The structure is 50% lower than that permitted on the site and of an open design and could not be determined as being at odds with the objectives of the development standard for height of buildings. In relation to heritage conservation, as an application for use, it is again abundantly clear that the use is entirely consistent with the historical use of the site for which it is listed in the LEP. The use of the relocatable structure is all that is to be considered as part of this application and not its physical impacts, which are addressed separately in the Building Information Certificate. Any consideration beyond that aspect is outside of the development application. Similarly, its use is not affected by the ability to relocate this. The use of the structure is entirely consistent with the heritage characteristics of the site. In relation to the concerns that were raised in the written submissions, the structure is not bolted to the concrete platform on the site. The plans which accompany the application demonstrate that it is possible for it to occur, but it is not the purpose for which it has been positioned thereon. Concerns about the escape of pollutants are not relevant to this application. Matters pertaining to these aspects are governed by the consent and the licence. Inconsistency with the existing consent relating to the proposed works in this part of the site is also not relevant to this application. In relation to the suitability of the site, the assessment report states that the impacts of the use in this part of the site have not been adequately considered. The use of a relocatable structure that is for the sole purpose of assisting in repairing and maintenance of vessels is entirely suited to this site, which is designated by virtue of its zoning for maritime industrial purposes. Just touching on a couple of the submissions also, if I may, Ms Morell, just that were mentioned previously. One is in relation to concurrence. Concurrence is not required for this application as integrated development because there's nothing that attaches to the use that triggers such requirements. There was concerns around safety. We don't believe there's any safety concern. We have highly qualified staff who are operating on this site through vigorous induction processes that require compliance with relevant legislation. And I've addressed the issue about the structure being bolted into the waterway. We would therefore request, however, that the panel carefully consider this application having regard to what development consent is actually sought for and the limitations that are already imposed on the site to ensure that adverse consequences do not result in terms of environmental impact, the latter being separate to what this application is for. The use of a relocatable structure to assist in repair and maintenance of vessels only. Thank you.
I think there may be some questions for you. Can I invite questions from the panel? I'll have one first of all, and that is, it seems to me that this has pretty well been its permanent spot, even though it's called a relocatable shed. Where else has it been moved around on the site before?
I don't have the applicant on the line, Ms Morell, but my understanding is it's used on an as-needs basis to actually be transferred around the site, depending on the nature of the work.
I'll just ask the question again. Are you aware of it being in any other location apart from where we see it today?
They are my instructions that it is moved around the site. I have not seen it moved personally, but that's my understanding, is that it's used dependent on the nature of the work that's being undertaken.
Oh, it just appears from inquiries that it's been in this one location. So what is the advantage of having this as a relocatable shed as opposed to where it is at the moment? And why would you call it a relocatable shed when it's bolted down? And I'll have the architect inform us of that in a moment.
The advantage of moving it around is the opportunity to be able to access boats more easily depending on where they've been lifted from the waterway into the site. It also is determined by where certain activities can take place on the site with respect to what they call spool repairs and maintenance, which are permitted. There's quite a large area that can be used for that purpose. So depending on things like winds at certain times, as well as other vessels that are in the yard being worked on, as to how a vessel may fit having regard to the position of another vessel. That's the advantage of being able to move it around to suit purpose.
It just appears that it hasn't been moved around, and you can't provide me with any evidence to the contrary. And I'm just wondering, if it was going to be a relocatable shed, you'd have to have various positions of where you may relocate it. It's not like just wheeling a caravan around the site. Can I ask Mr. Caro to ask some questions about the...
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking at the supplied drawing, which I assume is for this building, although it doesn't necessarily accord with the shape of it on the plan. But I'm taking it to be a hipped roof structure that's roughly 5 metres in height and 9 metres wide, of some dimension greater in length.
Yes.
And its details of its connection to the ground are shown as a bolted connection to cast in place pier footings. I'm just curious about how you would move such a structure of that size freely around the site on a needs basis. Someone would have to come and unbolt it off its footings and move a very substantial structure that would need to be temporarily braced, one would expect, to a new location where new footings would need to be poured. The idea of it being movable is, I think, in my mind, very questionable given the documents we have in front of us. So if anyone's there that can disavow me of that thought, I'd be interested to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Caro. The existing structure is not bolted into the ground. It rests on the ground at the moment. It is moved by a trolley system that enables it to be lifted onto that and then transferred around the site, such that it doesn't then require further anchoring.
So are these drawings incorrect?
The drawings as to the structure itself are correct, but they are not bolted into the structure itself is not bolted.
So what happens in high wind? What stops it moving around?
I would assume. Yeah, okay. So once it's put into its location, you know,
Is there somebody else there, Ms. Hodgkinson, that may be able to assist us?
Yeah, possibly. Lance Hodgkinson is also with me. He acts for the applicant in relation to project management matters on the site. And we've been collectively dealing with this matter with council, which is also subject to a building information certificate.
Now, who have we got here?
Our understanding, I have not seen it moved.
Now, can you come forward, because we can't hear you into the microphone yet? And what's your name, please?
Certainly. Lance Hodgkinson's my name. I have not seen the structure move, but what actually happens in practice, as we've been advised by our client, is that it is put on a trolley system and moved to the desired location when work is undertaken on various locations around the site. And then once it is taken to that location, the trolley is removed and it's put flat on the ground.
Well, that does not accord with the plans that we have in front of us, which is called Shed Fast Slab and Ground Anchor Layout.
Can I ask a question, please? This drawing to me appears as if it's a generic shed drawing for a non-specific site. Can I ask whether it's been drawn up based, as Tony said, it there's no length for the shed, there's only a height and a width. Can I ask whether this is a specific drawing for this shed on this site?
Yeah, it's prefabricated. It's prefabricated, and that's a standard off-the-shelf size.
Well, is this drawing a standard drawing for the whole? I'm asking, is this drawing made for the actual shed that's on the site that we're talking about?
That's correct.
So where's the length of the shed shown?
It's also shown. It would be scaled by the plan view then, which is on the left-hand side of the page. There is no dimension on there, I accept that.
I can't, like the size drawing we have here, I can't look at the actual designation of the drawing, but it doesn't seem to me to be a drawing that is being drawn for this site.
The plan view shows it in its length dimension.
Frames at no greater than 50 spacing, so it's.
There's nothing on this drawing to say that it's been drawn for this client or for this landowner for this particular site. That's what I'm asking. It seems to be a generic shed drawing.
And it's very
really adequate going to council for asking, I don't think, for the use of a shed where the description of the shed is incomplete. You've also said to us it's an open-sided shed on all four sides.
That's correct.
I don't think that's well described on this drawing either.
Well, the side elevation shows the pillars that attach to the roof.
There's cladding down to a certain height above the ground, and then that's the roof. Yep.
But then how do you explain all of these pier footing details and the slab anchor details? And if you're now telling me that it's just trolleyed around and then dropped, but that doesn't, this plan doesn't show me that.
So there's three different ways of securing the shed: pier footing, slab anchor and ground anchor, and you're telling us none of those are being used.
No, that's correct. It rests.
So this drawing has no relevance. This drawing has no relevance to this site.
Well, we believe the plans that are before you, aside from the pier layout and slab and ground detailing, the structure itself is what has been installed on the site.
Well, there should be a plan of that. I know that you're seeking for the use of this as opposed to it being a new DA, but there's nothing in the documentation that shows us that. Furthermore, if it was just sitting on the ground, well, people probably do have concerns about being airlifted up to somewhere else.
Well, the site is well below street level. I know that there were concerns raised before about it, slipping away to the road. The site's downhill of the roadway.
I know, I've been to the site and I'm just saying, but if it's just a roof, you'd expect a wind to be able to pick it up. I don't know. I haven't seen anything. And you're telling me that it's not going to be anchored in any way whatsoever. And it's not anchored at the moment.
No, it's not.
So why have we got these drawings showing us all these slab anchor details and pier footings?
Obviously, it's obviously fair to say those details should not be provided on the plan. I accept that. The drawing was provided for information purposes having regard to the fact that it's an application for use and is obviously also to be read in conjunction with the building information certificate, which also provided a range of information in relation to the shed. So I don't know whether it's worth the council being furnished, the panel being furnished with that information concurrently.
And there's also no information about the actual size of the shed in plan that you're asking approval for. That's the case.
The length is not confirmed, definitely.
So its dimensions are not shown anywhere in the documents we've been provided with on a site plan.
But on the plan prepared by Shedfast, it does have scaling on those elevations and the plan view. There's a nominated.
Can I ask another question, Madam Chair? Yeah, look, your approval from 1990,
yes,
which is still current because you've commenced, I assume.
Yes, it is.
Why have you not acted in accordance with that? So you've got an approval for additional structures. We don't have that approval in front of us, but we understand that it did include additional buildings.
The viability of that application, to the extent of the number of sheds, has not at any point in time proved financially viable or sustainable for the operator of the site.
Thanks.
Okay. Right here, I don't think we have any further questions. So we will leave this matter for now and we will determine it later on, and you'll be able to read the determination of the panel on the website. Thank you very much for assisting us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll now move on to the next item. And I do apologise for the delay in getting these matters heard. The next item is item 3, which is 11 Bennett Street, Cremorne. And I notice that we have 2 submitters who wish to address the panel, and we also have the planner and the project manager for the development. So could I first of all invite Ms. Lisa Wilkinson to address the panel? Thank you.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Hi, my husband, Peter Fitzsimons, was here, but he had to leave about 10 minutes ago. He just couldn't wait any longer. So unfortunately, you've just got me.
Not at all.
We live at number 19 Bennett Street, which by a quirk of 120 years that our property, Inglewood, has been here, the property next door to us, for some strange reason, is number 11. And so our property extends between Bennett Street all the way through to Bertha Road. The Bennett Street side of the property includes a lawn tennis court, but it is our main access into and out of the property. We've been here for almost 25 years. When we purchased the property, it was in a significant state of disrepair, and we've spent almost every one of the last 25 years bringing the property, which is a heritage item in this heritage conservation area, back to its former glory. We've used the architect Clive Lucas, who I'm sure the architects and town planners on the committee would know his work. He works with the National Trust. So we've put an enormous amount of effort into improving the property in the time that we've been here. Number 11 next door to us was once upon a time a beautiful old Federation home, because we have photos from our home's history and we can see it in the background. The house that is there has been, in the time that we've been here for the last 12 years, it's been in a state of disrepair, and the owner hasn't lived in the area. He is the person who put in the DA to subdivide the land up and then put the DA in for the 4 3-level townhouses. And we did put in a strong objection to the development. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to speak at the last planning meeting. We didn't get a chance to address the meeting, because even though we'd put in a written DA in response to the letter we received in the mailbox, and we sent our letter to the email address that was on the letter, there was no information saying that if we wanted to address any upcoming meeting, that we needed to tick a box on the North Sydney Council website. And given that we were responding to the communication that was offered by North Sydney Council, we were greatly disappointed. We had a meeting along with another neighbour on Bertha Road. We had a meeting with the General Manager and the Town Planner and the Mayor, Julie Gibson. They all recognised that the system of communication that North Sydney Council used in this instance, and obviously in other instances at the time, was completely inadequate for concerned neighbours. And we received a letter of apology from the Mayor saying that they are looking at all of our suggestions on how to improve the communication with concerned neighbours. So first of all, I want to thank you for communicating with me and allowing me to speak at the meeting. In terms of number 11, we want to support the suggestion and the proposal that you have before you, saying that this DA should be refused. There's a number of reasons, and those reasons remain the same as those I would have put forward had we got the chance to speak at the meeting on February the 3rd. And that is a number of reasons. This bulky development sits right on our border, runs the entire length of our common border running north-south. It is well over the height restriction that is allowed in the area. particularly being next to a heritage item, it is completely inappropriate. In looking at the way the planning committee or the council, whoever it was that put together the recommendations, there was no heed taken of the fact that the Bennett Street side of our property forms part of the heritage item that is this house. But because there's a lawn tennis court there with heritage surrounded gardens, for some reason, it was not seen as in any way significant in the way that this property was being assessed. In terms of the look of what's being proposed, again, particularly given that it's sitting next to a significant heritage item in the street, I would at best describe the buildings as architecturally wanting. They are not sympathetic to the fact that it's in a heritage conservation area. The noise that is going to result, particularly on the southern side, from 4 separate families who will have between them 55 lineal metres of glass doors and windows, almost all of which open and close, with verandas that look out to, if the big magnolia tree, which is the only significant tree on the property, is damaged in the building of this of these 4 structures, that magnolia will not last. There is nothing in the recommendation in the report that magnolia has to stay. It is the only bit of screening that we will be able to have from a building like this, and it's the same for the properties in Bertha Road. And there is no question that with the level of excavation and the footings of these structures, that the root system will be damaged. And given that the new purchaser of this property, because the property's now been flipped to a new owner who is a luxury property flipper, and what they're going to want to get the return on the money that they'll need is they're going to want the view of the harbour. And that's why there's a 3rd level that goes over the height restriction, and they're going to want that magnolia tree gone. So even with a small stipend on that tree, if it gets damaged, they're going to make a lot of money compared to what they'd have to pay in any kind of fine for that magnificent magnolia that sits there at the moment. We care a lot about this community. We've been here, as I said, for almost 25 years. Our property is loved by the neighbourhood. On any given day, people stop at our fence and look at our house and enjoy the fact that, you know, we're one of the few properties on the Lower North Shore that still has a lawn tennis court. We've put a lot of love and care and money and continued to give back to this property its original curtilage. The old gardens were sold off in the 1950s, and we've been buying it back against developments that were proposed, one as recently as 2 years ago. We didn't want to buy the land, but we also didn't want a big bulky concrete structure sitting overlooking us, taking all of our sun. And speaking of sun, there is no question that with the overbulk of that building, our property is going to get significant new shadows that it didn't have, and particularly with the lawn tennis court, it's going to throw more shadows than are currently there. The noise that is going to come from, as I said, from 4 families as opposed to 1. And there was one more thing. Oh, also the fact that there's been no compliance with clause 6.62A in the NSLEP 2013 that required that building to be demolished. And that is a significant last reason why this should definitely be refused. There is a lack of compliance across the board. The person who put in the original DA hasn't lived in the area for 12 years, had no regard for any neighbours whatsoever. We've now got a luxury property flipper who's bought this, who wants to sell it off to great financial advantage, and he also doesn't live in the area. And thank you very much. I know I've gone over the 5 minutes, but
No, not at all, because I've allowed everyone to go over today, so that's fine. Thank you very much for your submission, and that will assist the panel. We have Gillian Capoletto. Is that the correct pronunciation?
That's right, thank you.
Thank you. Please address the panel.
Okay, look, thank you very much for the opportunity to address the panel this afternoon. I won't repeat things that Lisa has said, rather say, look, I agree with everything she has said. I am the owner, and my husband and I live in the property which is to the south. So I actually face Bertha Road, number 4 Bertha Road. So we have the full back boundary of the property that this DA is the subject of. We note your recommendation, the recommendation of council, that you refuse this DA, and we very strongly support it. I guess for a couple of reasons. One is because it doesn't comply with the clause 6, but also because that we don't believe that the DA was properly considered at the time of your meeting back in early February. So I guess my main aim here is to say that we really want to work together with council. We want to preserve the character of this very special area that we live in. It's a conservation zone. We've only owned this property for 2 years. However, we moved from Harrison Street, which those that you know the area is only two blocks away. And we moved into this area because we loved Harrison Street, but this obviously is just has a character that is one step nicer. And we are very concerned about the fact that our heritage property is going to be affected by this big building at the back. One of our real concerns is that the building, and I put another submission in, a very quick submission, which you should have. The building, it appears from the previous submission to you as a panel from the independent consultant, there was a lot of suggestion that basically it was all about the streetscape. Now, ours isn't at the streetscape, ours is at the back end, but all 4 properties that adjoin this property are very much affected by the non-streetscape end. Lisa mentioned the 55 lineal metres of glass. That picture that you see in my submission is what looks directly into our backyard. And being a heritage property, it's not just the house, it's the curtilage. And the curtilage is the whole block of land. And one of the really lovely things about some of these heritage houses is that they still sit on large blocks of land, and that is part of their charm. And we really want to protect that. So in terms of this DA, and I don't want to go through our full submission from before, but it is a visually very imposing building from our perspective. There are huge noise implications because Lisa talked about 4 families. Certainly in developments like this in this area now, particularly with good schools and whatever, there are lots of these sorts of dwellings that are housing 2 families, not 1. So we have the potential of having more than 4 families looking into our backyard. We are very concerned about exceeding the height restriction. That creates a real precedent in a conservation area, a precedent that we're not keen to be part of. And Lisa's talked about the magnolia tree. It's a magnificent tree. It's the only thing that gives their property and our property any sort of privacy from this development. So I guess in summary, we're concerned about the non-compliance, of course, and I know you will be too. We're concerned about the lack of due process last time, the inadequacies in the report. In that report that you got last time, our property wasn't even mentioned as a heritage property that adjoined this DA application. And that was, for us, was very concerning, given that we as heritage property owners have to comply with so many requirements of council. And we feel it's very important that council work with us because we're the ones that are basically maintaining these beautiful properties for the future. So we're about to do a major renovation on this property, and we see that as basically securing the history of this property for the next 50 years at least. So we want to work with council to make it the best place for us and for others to live in this beautiful conservation zone. So I think really that's, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I implore you to, refuse this DA and to work together with you when a new DA comes in to get a better outcome for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are aware that there has been approval already granted for the demolition of the house and the subdivision of the land.
Yes, I'm aware of that, and that complies with all the regulations, and I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is the scale and the bulk of the architectural plans in the DA.
Yes, right here. Thank you very much for assisting us this afternoon, and now we will hear from the applicant's representatives, Kate Bartlett, planner, and Lisa Zhang, project manager.
Thank you for your time, Madam Chair and the panel members. Now, I'll talk through some of the issues, but I guess probably the first point to make, and you just touched on this, Ms. Morell, is that the application was actually thoroughly assessed and considered by both the council and the panel back in January to be an acceptable outcome. A number of issues have been raised today, and I'm happy to address those raised by the objectors, but what I might do is talk through the key issue before us, and then depending on whether the panel thinks it appropriate, I can also answer some of the issues that have been raised today. The key issue from the way it appears is obviously when it was assessed in January, it was determined that it was an acceptable proposal, but the council and the panel were not able to make a determination because demolition hadn't occurred yet of the structures on the existing site. The council itself put a recommendation that the whole process come back to the panel if it wasn't determined within 60 days, and the panel removed that requirement. Now, by circumstance, my client has now purchased the site, and unfortunately, because settlement didn't occur until the end of April, we weren't then able to satisfy council's requirements around the demolition occurring until the late in April. Almost immediately from settlement, when we received, when the settlement occurred on April 24th, the team has worked to get construction certificates issued, and the demolition is intended to start on the 8th of June with an anticipated finish date on the 5th of July. In our view, we feel like we've done everything we possibly can to align with the requirements imposed or to meet what was required of us. For us, it feels like refusing an application now on what is largely or appears to largely be a procedural matter around timeframes, when there's going to be a guaranteed demolition by the 5th of July, I guess for me, it will create unnecessary cost and time implications for an application that was, when it was assessed, considered to be acceptable on a planning merit basis. Our request is simply that the panel defer determination or send it back to the council, that subject to the demolition having been completed by early July, that it can be determined as it was originally recommended in January. That being said, if the panel had any questions from me, and if you'd like me to address some of the merit issues that the objectors highlighted, I'm more than happy to do that too.
I'd like you to, realising that this is a new panel, I would like you to also address the merit issues.
Certainly. So I think probably the first thing to highlight, there is concern from the objectors around heritage. There was a very detailed heritage assessment undertaken at the time by Weir Phillips, and a key attribute was looking at both the existing and the poor condition that it was in. and also how to achieve a built form and materiality that was appropriate for the conservation area in that aspect. The application for the 2 dual occupancy lots was compliant with the vast majority of controls. The exception, of course, as being discussed, was the height control, and that was driven by particular environmental planning grounds that occurred because you had significant existing excavation of the site below the footpaths of the surrounding precinct. So it was a particular element relating to the previous development and also the slope of the land that caused that height variation. The application was consistent with the vast majority of all the other planning controls. In terms of the tree retention, the magnolia is intended to be retained. And I think my client, I can appreciate sometimes people worry that trees don't survive the construction period. The councils these days put very strict controls around protection of tree root zones. They're often required to be mapped before we go near them. There's extensive protection requirements in there, and my client is happy to, well, would follow all of those by due process. In terms of overshadowing, the application or the proposal as it's sought to be approved has a compliant impact on all the surrounding properties. There is some slight overshadowing, but given the extensive areas of landscaping and gardening that the sites have, they still are able to achieve the required amount of sunlight to open space in June 21st. Now, one of the other issues was raised about the glazing and the noise and the impact of a single site with what is currently a single site, then having up to 4 families living in it. I think that it's quite important to also highlight the fact that dual occupancies in an area like this are actually a really important contributor to housing diversity and to affordability. Now, I'm not saying anything that it's affordable housing. It's clearly not. But yeah, I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that not everybody can afford an extensive single dwelling block in an area like this. That's part of the reason that there's a number of 3-story apartment buildings surrounding it. But what this is providing is a diversity of housing. And I think it highly unlikely that families living in the area are going to create significant noise impacts. So they're probably the key issues, unless you had other queries.
I think there were issues raised about the architectural design as well. I'll defer to my architects on the panel in this regard. Tony, do you have some questions you might like to ask?
Yeah, thanks, Jan. Look, I've just got a couple of quick questions. Do you know what the floor area is of each of these dwellings in square metres?
Let me just pull it up quickly. Parts of North Sydney don't actually have FSR controls all the time.
No, I'm not talking about the FSR. I want to just know what the DBA or the gross floor area is, just to get a feel for the size of the dwelling.
Yeah, not a problem. Sorry, I'm just pulling up the plans now. I'll just ask, Lisa, do you have that at foot? So I'm just talking to the PM.
She's on mute.
Sorry, they're about 180 square metres each.
180. So including their basement space?
Let me just pull up the plans actually.
While you're looking at it, the second question is the 2 proposed dwellings. Looking at the drawings, I assume the subdivision is going to be into 2 lots. Is that right?
It'll be 2 lots.
Dual occupancy, yeah.
That's right. So there'll be 2 dual occupancies on each lot.
Yeah, and okay, so the distance across the boundary between the 2 buildings, and I'm thinking about amenity and privacy, I suppose, between dwelling A2 and I think it's B1, seems to me to have bedrooms that are and bathrooms with windows that are only 3 metres apart or 1.5 metres. Is that
yes.
Which drawing? Drawing GA04.
Yeah.
Which I think is a kind of an amenity problem. And which gives rise to probably an architectural question about the bulk and scale and the relationship between these two buildings. Dynamically, they're going to read as one. There's a very narrow gap between them, and when you look at the elevation, particularly from the south, it is one very large building with, notwithstanding that it's two elements, but with minimal side setbacks. And I suppose the architect isn't there to answer the question.
No, he's not. I can really just talk to planning controls, but I suspect you already know that.
But it seems to me that that there's the buildings feel like very, very full envelopes, and the architectural expression that's been applied to them, I'm kind of struggling with how it really relates to the heritage and conservation precinct. I mean, it's got flat roof pitches. It's got a kind of a project home feel about it, if I can put it that way. And I'm not sure whether you can answer the question, but from my point of view, you've said it's consistent with the precinct's kind of character of buildings and landscapes, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, it's a bit of a difficult one, Mr. Caro. As you know, I'm not an architect, and I'm not going to try and pretend that
I
that's
appreciate that.
of expertise. I mean, I guess probably the key thoughts for me was that whilst it is a conservation area, it is a relatively diverse conservation area. There's a number of different housing typologies. When you're walking around there, there's sort of 1960s red brick 3-story walk-ups, deco age period apartment styles as well. The assessment at the time was intended that it was not going to try and pretend to be anything other than a contemporary building, but it was the intent that it wouldn't necessarily step out, and that it had significant masonry elements to not stick out in terms of materiality and impact. It was intended to sort of be a quiet building that just sat compatibly around. Now, in terms of the side setbacks, whilst they are only 3 metres, that is a compliant side setback, and they are for bedroom uses as well, and they are on lower levels. So that's not something I would necessarily see as a fundamental issue with privacy. And from a bulk and scale perspective, it is largely consistent with the planning controls there. I'd probably be hesitant to go into too much more detail without moving away from my area of expertise.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Can I ask more further questions in regards to architecture? I noticed on section drawing 08 that the dotted line for the existing building seems to show that the lawn or the garden at the rear was about 1 metre higher than it currently shown in the proposal. Is that correct?
Yes, there is some slight excavation at the rear. Lisa, did you want to talk to that a little bit more around some of the numbers? You're on mute again.
Sorry. Yeah, sure. So yeah, that is correct.
So how does that extend right across the whole width of those two dual occupancy or the duplexes?
My understanding is that it is.
So so what you're proposing to do is lower the whole building 1 metre across the whole site, excavating the landscaped area.
Yep. So if we're looking at
retaining walls against a tennis court on one side and against, is that right?
Yep. So it's actually steps down further, or steps down from the building that's adjacent to Borrowway.
I know it's a sloping site. I'm just trying to get a picture for how much effect you're having on the site compared to what's there at the moment.
Not particularly. So the actual site already steps down from street level down to the actual where the tennis court is, base of the building, probably already around.
I'm just noticing that you're taking it a further metre across the whole site width at the rear where those steps come down.
For the actual tennis court to the actual boundary of number 4, there is a natural fall to that ground.
The tennis court is
only about 1 metre, I would say.
Because the way the site operates, the tennis court sits at that lower level, which is essentially where the new design is proposing to retain.
Right, so that's not an issue.
No, there's already a tennis court sitting at that sort of fundamentally lowest level.
Okay. And I noticed that Tony was talking about referring to the roof pitch, which is one element of concern. I'm also concerned that it seems to appear that the bedroom 1, the top level, is under a flat roof. Is that correct?
Which section are you looking at?
On 8, I'm just trying to read what happens to this. I cannot see in our set of drawings a roof plan, so I'm guessing about the roof form.
So if you look at R9,
there is actually a
Slight
roof
pitch still.
Yeah, there's a very slight pitch
by the RL levels.
Site plan has a roof plan on it. It looks to me as if it's a flat roof at the back. Is that correct?
No, there's a very slight pitch. It goes from RL 73.62 to RL 73.57. So it's a slight pitch, but
we'll call it a flat roof. Sorry, I'm calling that a flat roof. Can I just say that when you're in a development, on a development site that has 2 heritage items adjacent, and in terms of conservation area, the idea of a conservation area is to refer to the bulk and scale and the architectural manner of how those buildings adjacent, and we're talking about 2 now, not just 1, I would expect the roof form to be much more aligned with what you've got adjacent. And I can see here that what they've done really is to try and maximise how many floors they can get in by lowering the pitch of the roof and changing the form of the roof so that it no longer matches that or reflects that of the adjacent heritage items. So I think that what's happened here is there's a big push to put in another floor, and I really don't think that it's appropriate on this site to lower the whole building another metre to do so, and to pull the roof down to that point that you're pushing it beyond where it's reasonable as a response to the heritage items next door. That's my comment.
And in that regard, if I can just follow up with a question, would there be any opportunity to, because they are bedrooms at that upper level, if there be any opportunity to put that in a roof form so that it is more sympathetic to what we see around in terms of the heritage?
Look, I think completely we would be more than happy to resolve some of these issues. I guess from our perspective contextually, and I completely appreciate it's a new panel and you have every right to reassess it. Our thinking had been that the key issues were, from a planning perspective, were resolved in that original recommendation for approval, and it was actually delegated to the officers to determine, and the only reason it's come back is obviously the land ownership change. If the panel has mind to propose additional conditions to make it, in your view, better reflect the conservation area, we have no objection to that. We would be happy to work with you or deal with whatever conditions imposed. I do think it is important to highlight, though, in terms of the levels dropping and some of those changes, that there's already the excavated tennis court, which takes up a significant chunk of the site, that's already at that level. That does result. It's not that we've got sort of a whole bunch of natural fall occurring that we're excavating out. There's already a significant excavation on the site for that structure.
Could I just make a comment, given that this has come up a couple of times? It should be noted, I've lived in the area since 1980. I too used to live up in Harrison Street and have walked past along this street since 1980. So I know the previous Federation home that was there and saw the current home get constructed. So I know what the fall of the land is. You can see very easily that the sandstone retaining wall that is in full view all the way up to the triple garage that currently sits right on the street line, that sandstone retaining wall, that excavation was done 120 years ago when our house was built. So referring back to land that's been excavated when it happened more than 120 years ago just doesn't seem relevant in 2021 as some sort of back reference to allow a structure to go over a height restriction. And just further to what the panel was just saying about it being a conservation area, but there are other buildings in the street that date to the 1960s. That very reason is why it was made a heritage conservation area, to make sure that the original character of this street was maintained and that there was really clear thought and proper process to any new buildings being sympathetic to anything it might be sitting beside, and why people live in this area.
My apologies, that wasn't my intention. In terms of the excavation of the tennis court, it's purely that the definition of existing ground level is what the height provision gets taken from in a technical sense. It was purely around that. In terms of the diversity of the conservation area, I don't disagree in that the point of conservation areas is that they're meant to be compatible. I guess what I was trying to reflect, and as I said at the start, I'm not an architect, I'm a planner, is that the intent of this design had always been something that would be relatively unobtrusive in the scale of things, but also, you know, of a later time.
Just one other factor is the arrangement of the stairs at the rear, having all of those sets of staircases coming straight out. I just find that exacerbates the bulk of the building as well, or the structure. And there would be other ways to provide access rather than staircases eating into your backyard area. Plus, as I said, it does exacerbate the bulk of it. And if that top floor could be put into a roof, and which would be obviously at a greater pitch, but it would then bring the wall height down, and you would have something that appears to be then more in sympathy with surrounding.
Can I just make one more comment in terms of the architectural merit of the rear of the building in particular, which does seem to be like a very vertical wall. Most design approaches for this sort of site with a sloping site would have a building that visually steps down the site. And in fact, I think council has that in its DCP. So I would expect that would have been one of the considerations presented here, and it's definitely not considered here. And I think the other part of this is to make sure that the future residents of these 4 dwellings will have some access to sunlight and daylight in their south-facing gardens. So there's been no effort really to provide the private landscaped areas with access to adequate sunlight. Another comment really.
And and I do appreciate that is part of the subdivision pattern, having those north-south blocks. So that can't always be achieved.
I had a question.
Yes, thank you.
I'd like the planner to comment on, there's a particular provision in the LEP, clause 6.6, that says that council shouldn't grant consent for the erection of a dual occupancy unless the form of the building will appear as a dwelling house. Now, I realise that the 2 dual occupancies are each being developed on a separate lot, but I have concerns that each dwelling is a reciprocal or a mirror image of the 2 halves are a mirror image of each other, and they don't look like that. They don't look like one dwelling. Can you comment on that? Because we're a different panel from the one that looked at this application but never determined it earlier in the year, so we have an obligation to look carefully at these issues. Can you comment on that clause 6.6?
Sure. Sure. So in terms of the clause, my application of it is, in my professional view, it met that consideration. Whilst it did look like mirror image houses that were brought together, you do see that typology quite regularly in a number of different conservation areas around Sydney, and sometimes they're dual occupancies and sometimes they're not, or detached or attached dwellings. In my view, it very clearly looks like a dwelling house. The fact that it has a mirror image, I don't think discounts it fundamentally from being treated as a dwelling house. It's a single house structure that sits on a lot of land, which has setbacks on either side and at the front. Did you want me to refer to the particular provisions in the LEP around that?
No, that's I understand that.
Yep. Okay, so I'll just, Mr. Caro, do you have any more questions?
No, thank you. No, thank you, Chair.
No? Very well. So where do we go from here?
So I guess probably the last thing I'd like to say is I do very much appreciate that this application's coming back in. I think from our perspective, we don't want to waste the time and work that's gone into this previous process. We would be more than happy to work to resolve any of the issues that have been raised today. And certainly the demolition on the other application is going to be started and finished within the next month. So any opportunity to resolve this, we would be happy to do.
Very well. Thank you very much. Yes, one more question.
On the demolition, can you give us an indication of how long when the construction certificate is going to be issued for the demolition?
It is issued. Already been issued the construction certificate.
Right. And how long do you expect the demolition to take?
It's actually 3 weeks at the moment. What we're planning what's happening right now is that our demolition contractor is actually notifying Safe Work New South Wales and going through the process before mobilising on site.
So you still didn't really answer the question, did you?
Is it about
3 weeks.
6 weeks or?
3 weeks. So we will be completed by the 5th of July, like Kate stated at the start.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just ask with that demolition?
Who's speaking, please?
Sorry, it's Lisa Wilkinson.
Yes, we don't know. I will say, Ms. Wilkinson, we don't normally have a town hall debate, but I will allow your question.
Sorry, it's the first time I've done one of these. Apologies. With the demolition, there's been no provision made for the sandstone retaining wall that joins our properties, and I'm just wondering what sort of provisions are going to be made for, it's a 120-year-old wall.
Sorry, Lisa, when you say provisions, as in provisions to protect it?
Yeah, to ensure that it's, I mean, given the sort of excavation that you're looking at, I'm very concerned about its integrity.
Yeah. So for the demolition, there's actually no further excavation. We will be providing engineers and vibration reports as well to ensure that all that is being retained. I noted also that our registered engineers have been going around requesting dilapidation reports as well. So I understand that number 4, 21 and 19 Burraway have been completed, and we're just waiting for some access to number 19 Bennett to gain for the dilapidation report to ensure that the condition it is at the start of it will be maintained throughout the actual demolition.
Okay, I got a letter about a property in Epping, but I've not received anything from anyone about our property.
I can get them to contact you again, but we sent, let me just bring it up.
And can I just comment that on occasions it is appropriate for a copy of the dilapidation report to be given to the owners of the subject premises. So I would ask as a courtesy that you do that as well.
Of course.
I'm sorry, this is Gillian again, and I know I'm out of order in terms of your processes, but I am really concerned about this construction certificate, because I understood that one of the conditions of the construction certificate was that those dilapidation reports were all done. And what I'm hearing is that the dilapidation reports aren't all done. So I'm not sure how a construction certificate can be issued without complying with that condition. I think it was condition 4.
So we've actually issued a statutory declaration to the certifier, noting that we've actually gone through the proper process of registered mail to notify the residents. So the certifier has accepted that, but since then we've also continued to get in touch with all the neighbours and then complete the dilapidations. So I understand number 19 Burraway was actually completed today, and that will be issued to the certifier in both council and of course yourselves once that's complete.
Lisa, I just need to understand, as in terms of the dilapidation reports, this is the project manager. If I could ask you, surely you've sought the permission of those heritage items to go and do your dilapidation reports.
We have, yes. So a notice was sent on the 7th of May, and then a second notice was sent on the 17th of May. Our engineers have also been out on the 24th of May door knocking to see if they can get access.
And have they at this point got access?
So for Bertha, 21 Burraway and 19 Burraway have been completed. 19 Bennett has not yet. But they have completed a dilapidation survey just by standing on the street to see what.
Okay. Well, clearly that is not good enough when you've got heritage items involved. So I would suggest that I don't think I'd be acting on that CC for demolition until, in fact, you've actually approached the owners of those heritage items and done an internal inspection for a proper dilapidation report before you do anything further. So that date of mid-July for the demolition to be complete may have to spin out, because clearly you need to go through the due processes. You can't rely on just sending a letter, and some people haven't received them, you can hear that, and it is up to you to ensure, as a project manager with the heritage items that adjoin this property, that you do the right thing in that regard.
So can I just clarify?
That is the intention, Chair.
Can I just clarify as well, though? We have actually gone on site and done those detailed assessments for all except one property. We haven't just sent them letters. We've actually gone on, done the report, done all the detailed site inspection. It is, my understanding, Lisa, is it's 19 Bennett, that's the one outstanding. Right. And we'll make sure that that occurs before demolition starts. But
and can I also suggest, which is often required, that you give a copy of those dilapidation reports to the adjoining conservation or heritage homes?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, very well. So we're having to think about how we progress this matter. I hear what you had to say, Kate, in terms of being your client being amenable to some refinements or changes, amendments to plans to ensure that these dual occupancies sit comfortably within its conservation heritage context. So I do appreciate your offer in that regard. The panel will determine and decide what it will do with this application, and our advice or our deliberations will be on the website by Monday of next week. So thank you all for assisting the panel in our deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we'll move to the next item, number 1, Bank Lane, North Sydney, which is the demolition of the existing heritage contributory item and the construction of a 2-storey dwelling house, car parking and landscaping. I have a submitter who wishes to address the panel, Vivian Predabon. Are you there, please?
Yes, we're here. Can you hear us?
Thank you.
No,
Vivian?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Vivian, thank you very much. Yes. Can you please address the panel?
Okay, I just can't work out how to turn my video on, but
we can hear you, so that's the most important thing. Yep.
So look, my name is Vivian Predabon. I'm a neighbour of 1 Bank Lane, and I live in 8 Union Street, so which is one of the terraces opposite across Bank Lane from the proposed development at 1 Bank Lane. I live in that terrace with my husband and our 2 very young children, and we've been in the area for 10 years. We love the area, and we love the style of the housing in the area. Look, as we outlined in our submission, and I won't go through it, I won't read the submission out, but I'll just, look, I thank you for the opportunity to highlight the 2 key concerns that we have, because, you know, it is quite concerning for us. So firstly, it's the design and the scale of the proposed development. We believe it's not sympathetic, and it's not in keeping with the character of the surrounding development. We also believe that it disregards the planning controls of the site and the area, and it also involves the removal of heritage items, which we don't believe is right. Also, the inclusion of the subterranean car park, in our minds, lifts the whole site up and sort of leads into our second concern, which is around privacy. So we're a very private family. We love that we have a private courtyard in the back of our house. We basically live in the rear of our terrace, which is north facing. Our bedroom's on the second level. The bathroom's also on one of those levels, and our living space in the courtyard, the kitchen and the lounge area is in the back of our terrace. So the windows that are being proposed on this development at One Bank Lane will be able to directly look into our bedrooms, and so we feel like we're losing a lot of our privacy that we have through that proposed development. And I know from speaking to the neighbours next to us, 4 and 6 Union Street, who have also submitted applications, they also feel the same. So look, they're the two major concerns for us, and I think we're very nervous, I think to say, about the loss of privacy into our backyard, and I guess that's our key concern. So thank you for the opportunity to speak and for you to hear how concerning it is for us.
Thank you very much for addressing the panel. And I don't have any other community representatives who wish to address the panel, but I do have the applicant's representative, and you can certainly stay on the line, Vivian, to hear what they have to say.
Unfortunately, I have to go to another meeting, but I'll listen to the video recording. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jessica Watson, Peter Lonigan, and Philip Jacob. Are you on the line? If you can all tune in to us and put your videos on, that would be appreciated.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Mm-hmm. Our video's on. Can you see us?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Great. Lovely, thanks.
Yeah. Hi, panel. Thanks for listening to our submissions. First of all, I'd just like to describe a little bit about the development, and hopefully you've all had the opportunity to visit the property.
Yes,
we have.
And see the condition of the existing house. I'm concerned that the council on a number of occasions has referred to the house as a heritage item. It is not a heritage item. It's a building within a conservation area. And my assessment of the building, which has been built through a number of significant and altering phases, is no longer possible to be retained or enhanced. And indeed, the existing building on the site doesn't provide any adequate accommodation for the residence that's proposed at the site. So my approach, after doing exhaustive research, measured drawings, fabric analysis, and condition reports, including the engineer's condition reports, which were not given to the council's heritage officer or not reported by council's heritage officer, and have been misconstrued by the council to say that this information was not provided, and it was provided. I think that for some reason the application has been misrepresented to our adversity, and I don't really think that's fair, and I'm not sure why that'd be the case, but that appears to be what's happened. So what we propose to do after doing that exhaustive research and investigation of the existing property was to propose a building that had a smaller footprint, was built of timber, had a simple vertical Victorian interpretive form with rooms in the roof and small living rooms on the ground floor, and an application that in fact complies with the height control, complies with the site coverage, complies with the landscape requirements and the unbuilt upon area. And then when we got a letter from the council, we made further amendments to make the garage into a carport and to provide even more information about the historic and fabric information on the site. I can't imagine how a heritage professional could advise that the house that was on the site could be retained and altered and added to in the condition that place is in. And I just want to take you through, if we can share the screen, the chronology of the development of the house, so that you can get an idea of what we've found in our research relating to the place.
Can you see this?
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
It's just zoomed in.
Yeah, we
No, it's
do
not.
have this, yes, but please continue, yes.
So on the top, the drawing on the top left shows the original Victorian form, which was a two-room Victorian cottage that had a fireplace in the right-hand or eastern room, a lean-to kitchen scullery that used the back of the fireplace to cook in, and a brick chimney. So it had a metal roof and some veranda form at the front. In that Victorian form also were typically Victorian openings to the southern elevation. If we move to the 1950s, and these are borne out by the aerial photographs from the 1940s that show an enlarged kitchen to the north or rear of the house, which is in the red colour, and a shed in the yard on the Ancram Street end of the site. The windows were enlarged and aluminium windows were installed. This is in the Victorian cottage. Then if we go between the 1950s and the 1970s, a fence was erected around the property. And then after 1976, and the council have the details of this 1976 alterations and additions, the brown building was added to the eastern side, which was an additional room or additional two rooms. Further modification to the interior of the place, including post 1976 a veranda, the covering of the veranda to Bank Lane, the erection of a timber fence around the perimeter of the property. I think a different shed in the yard, not the 1950s shed, because there's a slight difference to the shape, and the addition of more windows in the western elevation of the Victorian form. I'm not sure if the council's provided you with the fabric analysis. But the fabric analysis,
got that, Robert.
You don't have that?
We do.
Oh, you do? So the fabric analysis dates the fabric and rates its condition. But I think if you've been to the site, you'll see that the place is greatly altered. Just show the first photo. So the first photo shows the red painted sandstone rubble wall, the red hardwood timber paling fence. On the western elevation, a rotting weatherboard facade that's added to on the left and added to on the right, and has two windows kind of in the upper attic floor and the single bedroom. The valance is original from the 1890s, and that's interesting. But if we look at the photo pre the 1976 edition, which is this photo here, you can see that there's is it the 1970 pre?
That's 1976. Yeah.
So there's no windows in the western elevation. There's no timber fence. There's the 1950s aluminium square windows in the southern elevation, but even there, some dilapidation evident in the fabric. If we got more historic photos.
We've got this.
So
from the
this
east.
is a photo from the east, further up Bank Lane, that is prior to the 1976 addition, which was the addition of those brown rooms that then obscured and demolished the original eastern elevation. So those weatherboards, the valance, and the little 1950s lean-to structure for the kitchen were demolished and incorporated in the eastern addition towards the reserve. And so the current condition of the fabric and its chronology is incapable of being returned to its original form, both structurally and historically. And I think the interpretation of a Victorian timber cottage that we've attempted in the design proposal is a good and sensible interpretation of that form, and would sit neatly on the site. Like I said, the footprint's smaller than the existing footprint, and the provision of the off-street parking, whilst you know, is convenient for Philip, who's going to live in the house with his family. We can have that garage coming off Bank Lane, and the character of Bank Lane is really just rear garages. And if the council think that they'd like to see a garage accessed from Bank Lane, we're happy to do that. I'd just like to make a comment on the neighbours' objection to the application about the overlooking. The rooms that are proposed upstairs are bedrooms. They have external louvers on them, and we're happy to fix those external louvers to eliminate any possibility of the overlooking. But those rooms upstairs are, I'm just trying to find the plan. There's simply 2 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs, so it's not they're not the types of rooms that are sort of associated with overlooking. So there's a window to the main bedroom, a second bedroom, and a small children's room at the rear. And like I said, they can be screened, and we can eliminate the overlooking. I'd also like to read out one of the unsolicited letters of support from one of the neighbours, and I think this is relevant because the letters come from an old and very experienced architect who's lived in Bank Lane for more than 50 years. And the letter goes, I am an architect who lives in the same street as the application. The architects for this project are very environmentally and community aware. This design cleverly respects the context, ensuring the proposed building covers no more land than the existing structure and will not be significantly higher because of the low pitch of the proposed roof. In my opinion, the new design is probably the best possible solution. I support it. Elizabeth Howard, B. Arch. And the writer of the letter taught me when I was in first year more than 40 years ago, but I can assure you I didn't solicit this letter. It was a genuine letter of support. And that's what we set out to do in the design. And I think that that's what we've achieved. And I don't really understand the veracity of the council's objection to this application.
Okay, well, you've really touched on one element and whether demolition should be approved or not. And then the other issue is whether the replacement dwelling is an appropriate built form in what we see the context of Ancram and Banks. No, that was not, I'm not making a statement. I was hoping you might be able to advise us as to why you've chosen this built form of a two-storey dwelling to erect on the subject site.
Well, sorry, Ms. Morello, I didn't hear the question. Why?
The question is, there's two matters before the panel. The first one is the threshold question about whether demolition should be allowed. So if we put that question aside and then now move on to the built form that you have proposed in the plans and why it is appropriate in its context given the heritage conservation area and the heritage item.
So Ancram Street has, so there's 4 houses in Ancram Street. So in total there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 houses in Ancram Street, 4 of which are 2 stories. The house to the rear of our site has a 2-story addition on it. All of the houses on Union Street, the terrace houses, are 2-story houses.
That's a different, yes.
It's still in the conservation area, and certainly in the vicinity of the proposal. And I don't think that it's accurate to say that the conservation area is characterised by single-storey houses. What I tried to do was to design a building that was under the height control, which I did, to design a building that was timber clad and that maintained the floor levels of the existing building, which we've done. So I know that the resident from across the lane said that we lifted the house. We haven't. The house is at the same level as the existing house. So I think also that and I said to you earlier that I wanted to maintain that the Victorian verticality, which I think this sort of 1.5-story form does. So it maintains the proportions of a Victorian house, which is a requirement in the DCP, and the materials and finishes are comparable with the materials and finishes of the houses in the conservation area. You didn't want me to comment any further about the demolition, did you?
No. We've heard all you've had to say about the demolition, but all the other thing is, I suppose, the siting of the actual dwelling compared to what we see on the site today, which is facing Bank Lane with a parallel. Whereas at the moment, with the new plans, it's now parallel to its northern boundary, as opposed to Bank Lane.
Well, the current building actually runs over the boundary on the north, runs over the northern boundary, and I think just for the orderly development of the site, the maintenance of a setback, which is a 1600 millimetre setback from the northern common boundary, will minimise adverse impacts on that adjoining neighbour, and I don't think so. We've built within the line of the existing building, so we're not coming any closer southern boundary than the existing building comes.
No, I understand that, but the existing building is running parallel and closer to Bank Lane than what you've got in this.
Well, it actually doesn't. The building doesn't run parallel to Bank Lane.
Oh, the current one?
No.
Oh, it looks like
it on the plan.
It looks like it when you're in the street, in the lane.
It does. It does. So that on our plan, there's a black dotted line that shows the outline of the existing house. So,
There's a drawing that shows it parallel to the Bank Lane. I'm looking at.
Well, it certainly looks parallel.
Yeah, sorry, I'm incorrect. It does run parallel and right against the well, in fact, over the boundary. Like I said, I think it being parallel to the northern boundary is probably better. I don't think it really matters about what it does on Bank Lane. If you prefer it to be parallel, we're happy to modify that and make it parallel to Bank Lane. There's plenty of room either side for us to do that.
Can I pick that one up?
Yep.
Yeah, Peter, it's Tony Caro speaking. You made the comment in your presentation that you'd undertaken exhaustive studies of how you might deal with this complex little site. Did you look at what you could do in accommodating a reasonable brief for what's a very small site on one level?
Yeah, so Tony, you're probably aware of North Sydney Council's site controls, and I think the controls for the unbuilt on area and the landscape requirements and the site coverage. Well, just the site coverage alone, there's a maximum site coverage of 60 square metres. The site 60%. The site coverage is 155 square metres, which would be about 90 square metres.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that would be a problem, but I guess it's a very challenging but small project. I appreciate your commentary about the existing building and its state of dilapidation. But it seems to me that there needs to be some, we've got to break some rules to get an answer here. And
well, I didn't break any rules.
No, I know you didn't.
No rules are broken.
I know, you normally do, but this time...
But I don't, I haven't. I've learned my lesson. I'm not breaking any more rules anymore. I'm just doing what's in the LEP and the DCP, and I'm still getting flogged. So I don't know what I can do.
Yeah. Well, look, I just, one thing you haven't talked about is Gunara Reserve to the east, I think it is.
Well, thank you for asking me about that. And what we did, this is also a very interesting response from the council. Our landscaping plan was designed entirely to complement the planting and species in the reserve, and the council's landscape planner made us remove all of the native plants that we'd specified in our landscape and put in some magnolias and some European plantings that we thought were totally inappropriate for the site, given the significance of the reserve and the amenity that I sought to kind of to optimize in our design. And they said, no, change them all to European or to sort of alien species, which I did because I'm so compliant. I just want to do what the council wants. I changed all the plants to these rubbish European plants. And now, Tony, you're going to flog me for doing that, are you?
No. I guess I'm just mindful of scale. To me, I understand there's two-storey buildings there, but they seem to really exist within single-storey kind of attic forms. with, you know, dormer windows, whereas this is clearly a two-storey building. And I think there are some, you know, potential privacy issues and scale. It's a, you know, it's a very singular, I'm not going to say unique, but certainly a singular little part of North Sydney. And there seems to be great kind of consistency in its scale and feel and character. And it is small and clearly a workers kind of environment. But looking at your site plan, it looks to me like suddenly there's a building in the round plugged into a collection of connected buildings that form and shape the public's domain and the space. So Jan's comment about the alignment of the building, and you've said that it wouldn't be a problem, I think would be something you should look at, is to maybe twist the building so it does align Bank Lane. In doing so, if it remains a rectangle, it has a curious relationship to Ganura Reserve, but who's to say it's got to be a perfect rectangle? It could, and maybe it could back up more towards the corner, which is currently open, and kind of spatially be more connected with its outdoor space to Ganura Reserve. But look, my real question was, it would seem to me that if you could provide a higher site coverage and integrate the building more into the pattern and see if it existed on one level, could exist on one level, clearly you don't get the amount of floor space of two levels. If you've investigated that and it's not possible, that was really my question.
Yeah, I think that, well, Tony, the first thing that I did was kind of interrogate the possibility of a single-storey house, and really just knowing council's inflexibility on site coverage, and this, you know, North Sydney Council doesn't have floor space ratios as a mass and as a bulk and scale.
Yep, no, I appreciate that. Yep.
Which I think is, you know, which I think is very progressive. But we try, and David might think I'm fibbing now, but we try as hard as we can to stick within the site coverage. We try to hit the landscape requirements and the maximum built on areas in our developments, because we know that that's the important bulk and scale control of North Sydney Council. Given that the LEP height control is 8.5 metres, it's reasonable to expect that that site coverage prescribes a two-storey built form. Now,
you could also say, is the 8.5 metres reasonable? You know, some of these things are blanket controls that get put over, you know, precincts and whatever, and they're kind of broad tools. But is it necessarily the right answer in this very delicate little kind of precinct?
Well, like I said, I mean, there's plenty of two-storey buildings in the surrounding streets and houses in the conservation area, and there's a number of recent approvals that have approved second-storey additions to buildings in the conservation area, and indeed new two-storey buildings in the conservation area. We're significantly below that height control, and although there's that sort of waste, you know, that kind of horizontal datum in the bottom of those the dormer style windows. My intention was to be ambiguous about the height of the building, and the type and style of the design of the dormer was to make the dormer appear to be a roof element, even though there's still some element of wall behind that. So the dormers are quite dominant. They're traditionally and understood as roof elements, and that's what I've tried to do. Maybe I could change the cladding in the upper part of the building to make it look even more like a roof, But I think that the two-story and so the strange kind of landing of the building on the site really is a hangover from the existing building. You know, the existing building doesn't participate in Ancram Street, in the streetscape at all. And I wanted to maintain that kind of individual sort of plonked on kind of look that the current building, that the current timber building has. It's set well back from Ancram Street, and its address has always been Bank Lane. Historically, if you look at the Sands, directory, since the 1890s entry and the time this building was built, it always had the Bank Lane address and wasn't part of Ancram Street. And I don't think it should be part of or should appear to be part of Ancram Street. Yeah, the single story thing that would be nice. And we even looked at having kind of sort of semi-partial basement parts to a building below a single story, but they didn't seem to work on the site and really didn't really acknowledge the that verticality that I talked about, and that sort of singular timber high vertical proportioned cottage form that the original building had.
Certainly, I think if nothing else, if you twisted the building back to be parallel to Bank Lane, it's at least kind of occupying more the footprint of what's there at the moment.
Well, I think that'd be great for us because, as you said, we do then get the potential for that outdoor area adjacent to the dining room,
and there can at least be a kind of some attempt at interpretation of the existing pattern of development.
Yeah, and I'd love to do that, and we'll do that. But I'm just these days I'm just sort of terrified to do anything because it doesn't really matter what you do.
Can I just ask you? I'll ask you a question here. So, if you had to bring in your car access off Bank Lane, would you propose it then sort of on the corner, or would you actually shift the building down, or what would you do?
I'd do it on the corner as well. I think our initial, so the pre-A drawings I think had the carport coming off Bank Lane, and the council didn't kind of like that there. We were advised to put it on Ancram Street, but I can put it back on Bank Lane.
Bank Lane's better. Can I ask? I'm Jane. I'm also an architect and local.
Oh, right.
I just wanted to make a comment about the fact that there's been no reference to the adjacent heritage item and the scale and bulk of that building compared to yours. I do understand that you've got it set back from Ancram Street frontage. However, there is a definite issue, I think, with the scale of what you've produced here. It is a two-storey western elevation. There's no doubt about that visual presentation.
So thanks for the question. So one of the very first thing that I was struck by on the site was that double gable on the adjoining property, but also it was always lowered in comparison to this site. So I set our building back as far as I could practically set it back to maintain that double gable on the boundary. And we even talked amongst ourselves, not with the owner of the property, but providing some funds to restore that double gable that presents to the common boundary. So I have been from the first time I went to the site aware and sensitive to the elevation of the site elevation of Ancram, of number 3 Ancram.
Okay.
But also if you look at our western elevation, you can see the outline of this property And I think that there's actually better separation from the proposal than there is on the than there is.
I'm really not talking about the separation. That's not an issue from my point of view, but really it's about the comparative size and bulk, if you like, even though we are talking about very compact, and you have designed quite a compact building here. I think
how I've handled that is by setting our facade back, you know, at least 1/3 of the depth of the side, and off the well off that 1600 millimeters, well off the common boundary, so that double gable can be read from the street. So it was, without exaggeration, my very first consideration.
The way I look at this, your proposal is it's a very simple structure on a site that's extremely constrained. It's constrained physically, but it's also really, in my view, constrained by its environment. And it is set amongst a whole bunch of tiny cottages. And I really feel that your method of addressing the second story is not as sensitively handled as the other 2-story buildings in the area of a similar nature. I think you can exclude the terraces on Union Street because they are in fact a row of terraces. This building and this proposal is a single site with its, as you know, on the eastern side a park surrounded by lane and street frontage. I think it needs to really address the scale of the buildings that are adjacent in Ankrum, and it is seen visually as you are in Bank Lane or in Ankrum. Your proposal will be seen in the context of those other buildings in the vicinity. The building you've proposed is 2-story in nature because there's no setback of the first floor from the ground floor. It's a vertical face on the west facade, and I understand you're trying to emulate the existing building, although the nature of that is a lot lower. And I think there could be a better way of producing a building where there's more effort made to put, say, maybe one of the bedrooms downstairs, because the ground floor area seems capacious for living space. And yet you've got all these 3 bedrooms and bathrooms upstairs. And I think there's been very little effort made to provide a more compact ground floor to reduce the size of the second floor.
I don't think there was...
Those are my sort of comments on, I don't know, that's an approach to how to design for that site.
Yeah, I can assure you that there was lots of effort made. There was nothing that I did with very little effort. There was nothing that I did was with very little effort. We spent a great deal of time and consideration, with the benefit of you know, some considerable experience and broad experience in a heritage context. And you know, it is a very difficult site, and I tried my hardest. I didn't do anything without thinking about it.
Okay. Yeah. Given the benefit of an existing contributory item on that site in a conservation area, conservation being the idea to conserve, if you're given the benefit of being able to demolish an existing contributory item, I would have thought that there'd be much more response to the context, the scale, and the different ways that you could approach that building form. That's as much as I need to say, really.
Can I ask Peter a question? Can I go back to the issue of the demolition? We're told in the council report that council needs to be satisfied in considering an application involving demolition of a contributory item, that the applicant has demonstrated that an alternative of repair is not possible. Now, when I read the report, the council officer's report, your engineer hasn't ruled out that repair of the cottage is not possible.
No, it's misquoted the engineer's report. They've misquoted. We looked at the quote that's in the council report. It's misquoted.
Yeah, and we're informed in the report that there are at least 2 other examples of single-storey weatherboard cottages in state of disrepair, one at 60 Bank Street and one at 10 Monroe Street, that have been successfully repaired and reinstated rather than just demolished.
They weren't successful at all. They're in heritage terms, and in my heritage opinion, they're not very good at all. I think we have restored some timber cottages in the local government area in Eden Street, and they're shining examples of the restoration and conservation of timber cottages in conservation areas. But this place is far further gone than those ones were. So it isn't practical to conserve the building. We could measure it and we could rebuild it exactly as it is now. But what's there now, as I said, was built in the 1976 alterations and additions to the building. They are not significant. They're not significant. And there's actually no, I mean, just because the DCP goes around and nominates buildings as being contributory, it doesn't mean that they have heritage significance. What has heritage significance, according to the LEP, is what is listed in the schedule in the LEP, and this is not individually listed in the schedule in the LEP. The building next door is, and I think that if I built a building on Ancram Street that concealed the southern elevation of 3 Ancram Street, then that would adversely impact the heritage significance of the heritage item. And I think that being in a conservation area and building a new building, there just needs, there needs to be this, a particular and specific approach to the context, that immediate context, and that's what I've done.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you was, it's a very small site, only 105 square metres.
155, yeah.
155. Is there some scope for designing the second floor so that it's more of an attic?
Yeah.
Or appears more of an attic? Because that second floor has 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and there's also a bathroom on the ground floor. So it seems to me that it's quite, you're trying to fit quite a large floor area on a very small block. Is there some scope for lowering the roof pitch? And
yeah. So what I said I could do is make the upper floor through probably more through materials than lowering it, make it appear more roof-like. And like I said, those large dorms were designed to appear as though they were part of a roof. So I can make some modifications. I could make modifications to the materials and finish, and maybe a little bit to the pitch and nature of the top floor of the building. But the building, the floor areas, it's about 130 square metres. It's 123 square metres, which isn't big. And on a 155 square metre site, has a comparable floor space ratio of 0.7, somewhere between 0.7 and 0.8, which isn't an overdevelopment of the site, far less than any of the adjoining properties or the heritage listed properties that are in the vicinity. So I think in terms of the council's critical criteria, which is site coverage, unbuilt upon area, and landscape, this performs better than any of those places. And like I said, it's below the height. So I can change the appearance of the outside of the building, but
thank you.
Okay. Yep. Rightio. Well, we've heard everything you've had to say. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing? And we'll make a determination. And
no, I've just thanks for listening to me rant. And you know, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about my job. I don't take any of these things lightly. I don't do these things lazily. And you know, the investment of my my time and effort that I put into this work, you know, it makes me upset. You know, it upsets me.
No, we don't want to do that to you, but I want to ask you one more question, because you referenced there was a mistake in the report about the structural engineers.
There's nowhere in the structural engineers report that says that the building can be retained.
And did you say in the assessment report it said the opposite?
Yes. It also says in the assessment report that it's a heritage item, and it's not a heritage item. And it's,
I don't know where he's getting this, because it's not in the report that's in front of you.
Okay. Well, I understood it to be a contributory item, Peter. So
as it is quoted in the report.
Yeah.
On the front page of the report, it says it's a heritage item. Just I can read it out to you. So.
Right.
And it's, and I'm glad that the committee, that the panel are aware that it's noted in the VCP as a contributory building in a conservation area, but it's misleading when the report, the summary of the report says that it's a heritage item.
Oh, right, in the summary, you're right. Yes, okay.
That's an error.
Yeah.
But it's not fair that those sorts of errors are made, because it's critical. It's critical to not misrepresent the application in that way. It's so prejudicial.
You're lucky that all of us went on and read the whole report as opposed to relying on the executive summary.
Jen, did you see on page 40 where it said that the application was in the public interest? And I'm surprised that we're here when you've read that. So it says, on page 40 of the report, the proposal is considered to be in the public interest for the reasons provided throughout this report. And I agree with that part of the report wholeheartedly.
Okay, we're going to leave it on that note, and thank you all for assisting us. And our decision will be on the internet probably by next Monday. We seem to be having a very long meeting today, but I think by next Monday.
Sorry about that.
No, it's not you, it's the other items. But I would like to formally close the public portion of the meeting. So thank you both, and all of you rather, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So the next matter, which is in the closed session, can we end the recording?
Yeah.